All right, we're live. Welcome one, welcome all to the Grand Fleet. You ready to talk some One Piece chapter 976?
What do you think about the chapter in general?
Good chapter. I'm, a little gutted I didn't get to live react for it, but that's my own shortcoming there. It's a good chapter. I might as well, we might as well jump straight into it then. Jinbei came back.
Oh, he
So,
came back in force too.
and nothing wrong with him. No injuries, nothing.
Yeah, that was a big thing as well. I was having a look. I was trying to see any tiny little scars or anything that I could point out. Nothing. He's just seemingly completely fine. So that leads the question, what happened with him and Big Mum?
Well, a lot of people I know are thinking that he's potentially blind in that because when he was shown in the chapter, he was sort of squinting in that when he was smiling. But if you look real hard on it, the very bottom of the photo, it looks like you can see his pupils and that, so I reckon he's fine. If anything, maybe some fishmen got hurt in that, or if they went like real serious with it, maybe the Vinsmoke all got absolutely decimated. Like imagine that for a loss. We get Jinbei showing up, all's good and well, only to find out that everything that happened in Whole
She's
Cake,
dead.
yeah, everything that happened in Whole Cake was irrelevant. Vinsmokes all ended up dying.
Uh,
That would be rough.
that would be rough. Especially if it was like maybe just one of the really scrubby Vinsmokes that we don't like
Mm.
survived, but like Reiju's dead and things like that. That'd be pretty brutal. Um,
I mean, that said, did you notice Jinbei's bounty increase?
Yeah, and so when was that from, Jinbei's bounty increase?
Whole
What would have
Cake.
happened to increase that?
That
So that
was
was
Whole Cake.
purely just from Whole Cake.
So him being announced to have been part of the Straw Hat Pirates and to take on Big Mum's crew got him a 38 mil increase, which is a little insignificant, but at the same point in time, over 300, we know it's like nearly impossible to get
Yeah.
increases.
And you wouldn't think that he'd get an increase because they wouldn't take Luffy super seriously, right? Like obviously him having a 1.5 bill has finally like mean that they're now taking him really serious. But like him being on Luffy's crew, as opposed to him, in the past being associated with Big Mom and Whitebeard, wouldn't necessarily be like, oh man, he's making big moves. Like it's really, if anything, it's like being associated with Luffy over Whitebeard or Big Mom is a bit of a step down. So obviously, like they respect what he did, um, and they kind of can tell that Luffy's now, got a bit of power to him, and he's officially the helmsman of the Straw Hat Pirates. So we can officially say that he's that strong.
Mm.
Um, Interesting. Like, well, that the Straw Hat, sorry, are like 438 mil more bounty wise.
Well, it's weird because we know from SBSs and the Grand Fleet and Viva Card sort of stuff, all the Grand Fleet got a standardized 50 mil increase joining the Straw Hats. Then in Whole Cake, we didn't get a standardized increase, but Beige got a standardized 50 mil increase for being associated with Luffy. So now he's 350 mil. Sanji obviously almost doubled his bounty in that, going up to 330 mil, and those were the only known bounty increases other than Luffy that we got at that point in time. So the only three increases or four increases that there would have been Luffy, Sanji, Jinbei, and Capone.
Oh, right.
Which I
Which
mean,
is pretty interesting.
yeah, definitely.
So there was a couple things that I wanted to point out around this chapter. One being that obviously we already had the traitor being revealed to us, but now we have confirmation that he was in fact just faking all of his terrible, terrible devil fruit use through the entire thing, which is something that I mentioned to you a while back. That like it's pretty stupid for him to not be able to paint properly, considering like the craftsmanship and whatnot that's generally associated with samurai, and like the expertise in all of their skills. And he just paints like really, really dumb. Now we've seen that he can paint. Not only can he paint really, really well and create like some very useful things, he can also create ink clouds that rain down bullets that seemingly are like super heavy and like very, very powerful
Well,
bullets. Like they're stabbing into people, they're breaking through wooden crates. Like
well, not just
they're
that.
pretty tough.
This actually brings up another good point. Is how strong are they, and how strong is he? Because back in Dressrosa, when the bird gauge was closing in, we got a scene
Mhm.
of Kanjuro and Kinemon showcasing Armament Haki, so we know he's at least got Armament Haki, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of his painting ability, we've had no real clue as to like specifically how strong he was, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's crazy because like when you're thinking about all the scabbards and that, like unfortunately enough, they don't seem that competent for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, they seem, I don't know, they seem relatively like decent soldiers, but they don't necessarily seem like commander level threats.
Well, this brings a point where Conjurer is now seemingly the most competent outside of Ashura Doji and the Minx.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing is, I mean, he was essentially flying away from everyone to a point where seemingly no one else could chase him down. Like Sanji was about to go chase him down, but like seemingly none of the other scabbards would have been able to catch him or do anything to him, seen as though he was in the sky. So they assumedly don't have Geppo to chase after him, um, in that scenario. And then you've got the fact, not only the fact that he can fly, but the fact that he can essentially do like a mass scale like high damage abilities that he did fairly casually, and it was like ripping the ships apart. And like people were
Well,
saying even to him like, oh my god, you're gonna kill everyone, please stop, like stop, you're gonna kill everyone.
this brings up an excellent point though, where we go to Sanji that was chasing after him, and then he has to do a full 180 to go back and protect Nami, and he's copying a bulk of these arrows, which these arrows were decimating ships. They were doing like pretty
Considerable
reasonable
damage.
explosive damage when they were hitting, so they're hitting with strong impact. And you can see the impact of them exploding on Sanji, but he seems fine from it, which is almost confirming in a weird way that that's actually his raid suit that's
Yeah, so we
protecting
talked
him.
about this in our last one, in our last chat that we had. Essentially, we were questioning whether or not Sanji is now wearing his casual raid suit that he wears all the time. Like his normal suit right now has essentially been
Upgraded.
adapted to become his raid suit. Yeah, his raid suit. And so we're basically saying like, I wonder if he's constantly just wearing his raid suit right now, or if he has to carry it around with him, and how often he'll use it. Because obviously, if he has it on all the time, he may as well use it all the time. And
Well,
that's pretty interesting.
this actually kind of leads into sort of a speculatory idea that I've had with Sanji, and like just looking at the Straw Hats, and it's another topic I want to have another time. But like, what does the Straw Hats? What will it take for the Straw Hats to truly be a Yonko crew? And realistically, throughout the entire story, post time skip at least, Sanji's biggest flaw has been his lack of durability and his armament haki. He got his leg cracked against Virgo. He was outmatched by Doflamingo, and even all throughout Whole Cake Island, he was struggling to do significant damage long term to people. And so it would almost be more beneficial for him as a character, in my opinion, if he uses the raid suit temporarily, or has adapted the raid suit into a toned down version like it is now as a suit, if that is the case. And what that'll do is sort of work as a bit of a durability buff for him. So that way, if he's not being able to be like one shot by stronger people, say as we saw against Page One in the Page One fight, where he had a lot more durability and strength because of it, fighting someone like an Ancient Zone user, where he's taking less damage, it might give him the opening essentially to have a long drawn out fight where his armament haki can flourish because he's not being able to be taken out of the battle easily, even though he's sort of below other people in their armament haki, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. It is really interesting, kind of seeing the way that they're going to go with him. He did seem to kind of step up, like, oh, I'll take on this guy. And the thing is I know that we mentioned that that the scabbards haven't seemed to be too strong. However, if you're talking about like the top tier of the scabbards, which he was seemingly Kanjuro was seemingly showing that he was. I mean, you're looking at the Minks who fought fairly evenly with Jack. And so we're essentially looking at like a
I mean,
Jack level
even Usher Doji
person.
shooting Maru started to get the upper hand on Jack and sort of belittled Jack in a way, saying like, "You think I'm gonna die to someone of your level?" Like,
Yeah, and so like it's pretty interesting seeing that because we've got we've got all these like there's so many of those scabbards, and probably not all of them are at that level. Obviously, these are the people that have had more time to train, and so they're probably like a little bit stronger, a little bit higher up. But seeing that Sanji was just very confidently about to go after one of them, that's a pretty good thing for us, right? That's a pretty good saying that he assumes that he can basically gappo through the sky and fight this person who is potentially near Jack level. That's
see,
pretty interesting, especially when you consider. So one of the other really strong of the scabbards was we literally saw um,
Kawamatsu.
Zoro fighting him like evenly, pretty evenly. If anything, maybe struggling a little bit. Now, obviously, Zoro's gotten a power up since then, but still, that was pretty interesting. How Zoro was like, "Oh,
The
okay, this guy isn't just
scabbards
a pushover."
the scabbards are very awkward to power scale because the strongest three of them have fought a third commander and been reasonable. An ex scabbard in Izo is the 16th Division commander on the Whitebeard Pirates, and seemingly they all know armament haki and observation haki, which is a, I mean, hell, realistically, that's a better feat than a lot of the Straw Hats have, considering there's only 4 Straw Hats, 5 Straw Hats that actually have haki. Um,
Hmm.
then on top of that, with the scabbards though, we've always sort of treated them as a meme up until now. So there hasn't been a genuine good showcasing where we can actually like take a look at them and be like, what is your limit? What is your peak?
That's And that's the interesting thing, right? Because the two most daunting figures of the scabbards, right? Like the leader of the scabbards, and then I guess he's not a scabbard, but the Lord himself, right? Momonosuke. You've got Momonosuke who turns into a pathetic version of a dragon, which is basically just like a joke against Kaido,
I mean,
and loves girls all the time. And then you've got someone like Kinemon, who like we were literally introduced to him as a whole bunch of different parts of bodies, and they're just kind of like running around going, "Where's my head? Where's my body?" Like they were literally pretty much introduced as like meme characters,
I
and
mean,
now like we're getting into this forefront fight where there's some of the more significant characters so far in the show, as Wano is one of the more significant arcs we've ever seen in the show.
well, even Kinemon though, he was introduced as Foxfire Kinemon. He can cut fire. That's a feat that Zoro doesn't have at the moment. It's an ability unique to him.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not saying he's stronger than Zoro, considering in Dressrosa when Zoro did the Trikers, like the giant cut against Picker.
Yeah.
You essentially had Kinemon off to the side going, "Oh my god, that's so impressive! Oh, you're so strong, Sugoi," sort of thing. Um, but still, like he's a competent swordsman. To the point where we haven't seen it, but we've been told over and over that he's a competent fighter. Like even him and Shuten Maru when they were talking, Kinemon's like, "Don't forget how strong I can be. Like you know the kind of
Yeah.
man I am." And in the flashback, we see him fighting them.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing is they genuinely do look at him as the leader of the scabbards. And these people have had showings again equal to Jack, equal to third division commanders who can basically decimate entire like countries. Like there was 2 scabbards on the country of Zoe and Jack and a whole bunch of like what is pretty much like low tier like scrub
I
lords
mean,
um
even if they're
just
low tier scrub
completely
lords,
decimated they just completely decimated Zoe. Like an entire country full of a warrior race that have like extra like supernatural powers, essentially like zone level powers without having to have a zone. Um, and yeah, these people just kind of walked in and dumpstered them. And if it weren't for these 2 scabbards, Zoe would have gotten absolutely clobbered, right? That's like probably one of the strongest islands, quote unquote, like kingdoms or whatever you want to call it. Probably one of the strongest groups of people in the show. Like you've got like warrior races like Amazon Lily, and then you've got Zoe, and then you have like the giants who are probably the strongest. But then there's not much else. Generally it's just peasants and things like that. So these people can take out this one commander can take out like entire countries of some of the strongest fighters. And you've got these scabbards who are pretty much fighting equally against that. They're pretty high tier threats.
I mean, definitely. It's interesting because it's like the scabbards have always been sort of put on the short end of the stick, where it's like we'll get to them. You'll find out more about them later. They'll be relevant later. But it's
Yeah.
almost getting to the point now where it's like there's almost nothing to fear against the fight against Kaido and Big Mom outside of Kaido and Big Mom individually themselves, because if we have all these scabbards that range roughly in commander level, like just for argument's sake here, you've got King, Queen, Jack, and Smoothie that's confirmed in Wano that we've actually seen in Wano, right? So those are the
Yeah.
only four commander level people.
And we
Well,
don't have Katakuri, we don't have Cracker, we don't have
Snack.
yeah.
We have Perospero and we have Daifuku. They're
Perospero potentially. I don't know, Daifuku and like oven tier people. I feel like a a scabbard will just take them out. Like it
well,
wouldn't really be a tough fight.
so
It wouldn't be like they just walk over you, but it wouldn't be a tough fight. It would just be like, yep, that scabbard beats him.
it's
Done.
a mid
Move on.
diff. It's a mid diff. Like
Yeah.
you feel confident that they'll
Like
win,
if you're kind
but
of
they'll be
if you're
pushed
kind of
short.
like assigning scabbards to fights, you would just assign one to Daifuku and then just be like, yeah, he fights him and he wins. Done. Move on.
Well, so this is what I'm getting to though. So you got four commander level people. We have Jinbei now returned. Jinbei fought and tied with the rookie ace, so he's rookie ace level. Since then Ace got promoted to second division commander. I personally think he was probably the strongest second division commander based on what we now know as supplementary data for the Whitebeard Pirates. But even
So
separate to that, you
yeah, in terms of power scaling Jinbe, here's essentially where I'm gonna place him, right? Um, I'm essentially saying whatever showing of extra power Zoro is about to show that he's gained new power, that power that he's about to show is the only thing that's going to put him above Jinbe. I think if Zoro hadn't had this week of training with this unique sword, Jinbe is stronger than
yeah.
Zoro. I
So
think what we're about to see is we're going to literally watch Zoro surpass Jinbe in the next fight that Zoro has that actually tests him.
So I think the same with Sanji as well. But the way I'm gonna interpret it from now on is the monster trio no longer consists of Luffy. I think Luffy's surpassed being
Uh,
part of the monster trio, and he's sort of let Jinbei inherit that role, where the top three fighters on the crew is going to be Zoro, Sanji, Jinbei, and to me, it's fair enough. I mean, he's a warlord. He's strong. We've seen him fight people of second commander level. We've seen him survive against admiral level attacks, Yonko level attacks. He's a strong dude. Which brings me back to my point. If we've got four commanders, he's essentially got an easy win against one of the two second commanders, or a hard done fight against the first commander. From what we know of him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So he's a pretty significant tool in this fight. Like, yeah, it's pretty insane. Plus, like, considering the fact that he's here, him being here has already seemingly saved like a lot of samurai from just getting wiped out and sent into the ocean. Like we were basically we were witnessing them saying, "We're never going to be able to catch them. They're outside of our range. We can't beat them." And the thing is, when I saw that hole go through the side of the ship, I'm thinking, oh, this is Kid showing off his devil fruit and how he can use it insanely long ranged. And that'll be like a pretty significant threat because he could just like attack you and rip your ship apart before you can even get close to him. That's probably why he was such a terror on the seas pre Grand Line, or while they were in Grand
Pre time
Line.
skip.
Yeah, pre time skip, because he like literally like a navy ship would get anywhere like just within his sight and he would rip it in half. And you're not going to catch someone if they rip your ship in half before you're even halfway to getting your cannons in range.
I mean,
But then yeah, then it's just like Jinbe comes out of nowhere and he gives this like crazy awesome speech, and then it's just yeah, and then they just announce his bounty, and it's like wow. And then you even see people like Kid going, "Oh my god, he's on his team," almost jealous of the fact that
Same
he's
with
joined
same with Law going no way.
joining
It's
with.
and it's like we almost forget the prestige that the Warlords have, where the Warlords are one of the three great powers. And I mean, everyone has their own opinion on how strong people are in that. I think Jinbei is arguably like dead middle in terms of the original Warlords in strength. I think it's all but been confirmed essentially that as much as people love him, because I love him too, Crocodile was the weakest warlord pre-time skip. It's not just me saying that. It's not just the fact that a pre-time skip, pre-gear Luffy beat Crocodile, but it's a fact that Blackbeard, while he was on the Whitebeard Pirates crew, we know that Crocodile went up against Whitebeard and got his ass handed to him. And then when Blackbeard got his Devil Fruit, he thought, I'm going to become a warlord by taking out Crocodile because I know I'll be able to beat him easy.
Oh, so you
I feel like it goes Crocodile. There's a bit of argument to say Moria. Then after Moria, it could arguably be Jinbei or Kuma. That might upset a lot of people. I feel like it's fundamentally just agreed upon that Mihawk's number one. In terms of Boa and Doflamingo, I put Boa over Doflamingo. I can see why you'd argue either with them. Doflamingo has an amazing showcasing, but they're two warlords that have all three kinds of haki. Boa has a ridiculously broken fruit. Doflamingo, I mean, he's Doflamingo. He is so damn durable, so damn resilient. He is insane. But like, even so, having a warlord on your crew is an insanely impressive thing. We forget that like pre-time skip, it was a Law and Kid matchup to take down a pacifista, and they were thinking like, oh my god, this is a warlord. Like obviously they thought a warlord would be stronger than it when they ended up beating the pacifista, but they were like, crap, this is a warlord. What are we doing?
exactly like they did not take even there was that many people even though there was that many people on the island they did not take a warlord for granted like they were genuinely of the opinion that if there was a warlord there despite the fact that all of the supernova were on that island at that same time that if there's a warlord there there's a chance they could all be beaten just straight up which is very very like scary to think.
And I mean, like, it's reasonably fair. Up until recently, in that, you could even argue that Jinbei's been stronger than Luffy. I mean,
I would say if Jinbe came to the island pre-time skip with all the supernova there, he would handily beat all of them. Considering how easily Kuma one-shot the entire Straw Hat crew, and it was like virtually hopeless. I know that Kizaru was there as well, but like I think he would pretty much handily just beat all of them. I mean, they didn't even have Haki. None of them had Haki. Like they wouldn't even be able to hurt Jinbe unless they got some crazy shot out of nowhere on him,
so
and I just don't think that would be the case.
I'm gonna call it now. I reckon Jinbei's reintroduction here, the best case scenario for him is he just completely negates Smoothie. We get a really good significant showcasing of Smoothie, but it's just a bad matchup for her going up against a water controller.
Yeah, I could see that, and I could also see that as being like a really good fit for Jimby because Smoothie is a second division commander, and not just that, but I think it's 900 and around 60 million, right? Her bounty, like
She's
it's
nine
very
hundred and
very high.
she's 938. Cracker was 860 or 70.
Yeah, right. So like
She's
you
just
can
under a bill.
see, yeah, just under a bill, and a billion is a pretty. I mean, they are fairly. They are basically saying that Luffy is another Yonko. Even if he isn't necessarily like one of the Yonko, they're basically considering him, if anything, like B tier emperor, right?
Yeah.
And he has a 1.5 bill, and his bounty literally jumped a bill because of that. Like you're putting once you get like near a bill, you're like getting close to that like super 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 high tier, like the tier of like this person could probably start looking at trying to take down a Yonko
Well,
suit.
it
Like
it gets to the point where it's like if you look at fights in One Piece and that, especially in the high tier fights and that, when people are genuinely equal, their fight lasts for days. You have the Ace and Jinbei fight, you have the Akainu and Akiji fight. These fights last for a long period of time because they're so equal. It's waiting for someone to slip up. But when you have someone like Luffy that's so far under these people, It's a matter of their haki blooms so fast that they just surpass them within a couple of hours, like within a day, or they
Yeah.
lose. And that's why I don't think we're actually going to get to the point in the series where we're watching like multi-day to multi-week fights. I mean, we're getting to Onigashima now, and we're about to go up against commander level people, and people are like, oh, these people are supposed to be able to fight for days. I don't think that's the point. I think the point's going to be like, we either overwhelm them or get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like fairly like short and sweet. Honestly, what I'm thinking more is I don't think they're going to go the route of this fight's been going on for 4 hours. Like every time they check back in, so say like they check in on like Luffy and someone fighting Kaido, and then they go away to someone else fighting. They come back to Luffy later, and they're like, it's been 17 hours that they've been fighting, and here's what they're doing now. I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's generally going to be fairly brief fights. Obviously, there's a lot of fights to get through, so they're not just going to all like collide and then fall over and then the fight's done. But they're going to be fairly brief, within like a couple days, which is a lot considering. I mean, even if you look at, I mean, like look at like medieval, like giant like medieval battles, right? There are medieval battles that genuinely went on for like 2 days of like a clash, like one army
Just
cattle
sieges.
charging into another army, and everyone's just fighting each other, and yeah, and like not even sieges, just genuine like open field combat that lasted for multiple days, just because there's so many units and there's so many people. So a lot of the times, there's people just standing in the back lines, not even fighting, just kind of waiting for their turn, and then it just kind of slowly but surely whittles down all of the numbers until there's like a few people left, and then by the end of it, there's just bodies everywhere. Like
Hmm.
there are genuinely instances where things fight for days, but even in fights like that lasted for days, each individual fight was probably just like a stab, you're dead. Now I get stabbed, I'm dead. Move on to the next. Like people weren't necessarily like having like sword duels, like fencing battles in the middle of these massive, open medieval style wars. They're just kind of running each other and either killing or being killed.
I mean,
And so, like, that's generally how like a large scale battle like this will play out. So I don't think it'll necessarily be like a quick battle in general, but I don't think the fights are going to last multiple days where they've destroyed entire islands and things like that. I just don't think that'll happen.
I'm now a little confused with something, right? So we have Kanjuro going to Onigashima with Momo. He's, flying back to tell them what's going on to like recoup and all that, right? But he's also talking about, oh, I now know Hiyori's alive. I'm gonna go take out Hiyori. Hiyori is back on Wano. She's in the opposite direction. So are we gonna have to send someone back from the scabbards to go protect Hiyori, or potentially send someone of significance back to get her while everyone else travels to Onigashima for the fights? Or is it going to be it's just all settled on Onigashima, Kanjuro's back at Onigashima? That was just kind of like a throwaway line to be like acknowledging that's a possibility.
I'm not sure. I'm thinking there may be I'm thinking that there may be like a more long drawn out thing to happen. I think maybe there will be kind of a like a rescue, Momonosuke like mini arc, because I mean Luffy has said personally that he's going to come and save him, and I feel like him saying that isn't like I'm going to send one of my like little minions to come save you. I'm thinking one of two things: either they continue this fight, the fight ends, and then later they go and save him, and Momonosuke through some sheer act of will has managed to survive and not die, or potentially it could be something like Marco showing up and saving him on the way, or Weeble showing up and like killing Conjuro, and then
Ooh,
Momonosuke
okay.
escaping because Weeble doesn't care about him. Something like that. Like maybe some other party will rock up,
We
and
do we
that will
do have the
settle that scenario.
Nekomamushi cavalry that is yet unaccounted for. It'd be interesting if Kanjuro made it back to shore and Nekomamushi shows up and Kanjuro tries to manipulate him because he doesn't have the
Knowledge, yeah,
communication to know that he's the traitor.
possible, yeah.
Um,
Although, wouldn't you just have Momonosuke say, "Help me," and then he would
well,
immediately help?
I'm more meaning if Kanjuro leaves Momo in the hands of Kaido and Orochi and then he goes back for Hiyori,
Yeah,
then
right.
Nekomamushi makes it onto Wano from the other end of the island or wherever it is that they're. Like I think if you're looking at it from a map's perspective, from a bird eye view, if Onigashima is up on the island, the Straw Hats arrived from the right of the island.
Yeah, right.
So if he gets up from there and he just makes landfall on that, and Kanjuro, realizes that, he might try to manipulate Nekomamushi potentially into, oh, that's not Hiyori. Come help me kill this person. That's the traitor. They've got the ability to change their face, or just something ridiculous like that.
That would be something interesting. Honestly, when I was reading that chapter, what I thought was, I thought Momo was gonna, because he was saying like, I know that I'm not Odin, I know that I'm not like as strong as my father. I thought he was gonna get like really, really frustrated and just let out a massive Conqueror's Haki wail and literally knock out Kondro out of the air, and then somebody was gonna like save him while falling midair.
Actually, do you
I
know
thought that
what?
would have been really interesting
That is
because it
an
would have basically shown that Momonosuke is eventually going to become as strong as Odin, which would be like a cool little
that is
thing
actually
to
another
have.
excellent point. Momo can control Zoe.
It's true, he
He
can.
might subconsciously actually summon the island of Zoe here.
Yeah, that is
I
possible.
mean, that's something
That's
that a lot of people have theorized about a lot in the past, but like, in terms of him himself being able to do something, that would be actually very significant.
yeah. Well, I always thought that it would be in times of like Luffy essentially like at very very end game, Luffy essentially waging war against the world. You have Zoe as a battleship charging alongside with Luffy's allies. That would be very very interesting.
One thing I will say, I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but obviously we're getting real close to Onigashima now, and we can actually see it a bit closer. Like we can actually see teeth on it, so it is genuinely looking like a skull. In the latest Pirate Warriors game that came out, Pirate Warriors 4, they showed Onigashima as being a volcano, so it's a lava section with the houses and that built on top. It'll be interesting per se if that is the battle area, like in terms of the landscape, because that actually might make things a lot harder for people like Jinbei, because he might actually not be able to fight to his full capabilities, already being nerfed being on land as opposed to being on water, not having any moisture around to fight.
Yeah, that is true. That would be pretty interesting to see. Um, However, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how Smoothie would go with that as well because obviously she can smooth out things like lava and stuff like that. But honestly, I was kind of hoping to see some broken shit where Smoothie just kind of takes the moisture out of the air and uses it to attack.
I mean,
Um,
I could see her
but then
doing
if
that
she
sort of like the
if Jinbei can't do it, then I don't think Luffy. I don't think. Um,
she could.
yeah, I don't
Well,
think if Jinbei could. Yeah.
we know she
You
can
go ahead.
liquefy stuff though. That's like inanimate. Like we've seen her liquefy stone into water
Yeah,
or into
definitely. So
moisture.
I guess yeah, she could just kind of reach a hand into the ground.
Although I
I don't know.
guess
It's always kind of interesting seeing someone pull power out of the literal air around them because it's like, how do you stop them from taking that power? There's nothing that you can do.
that might be a double-edged sword though in a way, where if she starts to use her power, it's immediately giving Jinbei the same access to her power.
Yeah, that is fair. That's true.
I am thoroughly impressed. For the first time in One Piece, cannons have actually done something. These long-range cannons, smart, hella useful. If they've got them just laced up on the island, facing into Wano, that would be ridiculous. That would actually be insanely good.
I'm also I don't know. Call me a stickler, but obviously, like the Straw Hat Pirates could have stopped all of that. Kid could have just stopped all of the cannonballs,
Law could
etc.,
have just
etc., etc.
fully done a Yui on them and send them flying back like he did in Savity.
Yeah. It's there could have been like none of that destruction could have happened, and it pretty much was just purely to set up Jimmy's introduction. But it was a cool introduction, so I'm trying not to be too much of a stickler about it.
Um, the question is, did Jinbei come alone? And where has Jinbei been? Like, has he been in Wano long enough to know that this is the perfect time to show up? Did he just get here and instinctively know, oh, I've got to go to Onigashima? They're probably already on their way there.
It is true, and where are all the other fishmen as well?
Because if the other fishmen didn't come, fair enough. Did Jinbei meet up with Nekomamushi in that? Would he even really have a connection or know of them? We know that Jinbei has got a connection with Whitebeard, so maybe maybe Jinbei already has a microt of a connection with the Scabbards already, having been exposed to them in the past.
I would assume that him being a helmsman and being a fishman would mean that he's quite a bit more capable of sailing than, say, Big Mum's crew is. And so, why did Big Mum beat him to the island? Why is he here
Well,
so much later than her?
is it possible that Jinbei's actually been rallying allies? It'd be very interesting if Jinbei's shown up here. We're looking at like we've lost a few ships and we've got a lot of people, but it's like, all right, we're gonna get this going. Come on, the fight's gonna be good. And then just like says to them, "Hold up 5 minutes," and then all of a sudden the Grand Fleet shows up, or just
That would be
something like
really
that.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, Jinbei probably would know of the Grand Fleet, and like if he just walked up to the yeah, if he sent a message out to all of them saying, "I am,
The
I'm the
new
new,
recruit.
yeah, and we need you, etc., etc." They'd all come definitely.
Mm. Um,
That'd be really interesting, and then yeah, potentially, I don't know, just having a giant there could. I'm constantly thinking of how this is going to link in with Elbath as being the next arc, and how it's not going to like just be thoroughly disappointing. Because I don't want it to be something like as simple as like they start to win the fight, and so Big Mom goes, "I'm going to run away and go to Elbath," because I just don't see her running away. I just don't see that
well,
in
okay.
her. I just
What
see her being
if
stubborn.
what if
I think there has to be
Hydrogen
something that pulls her to there.
What if Hydrogen and the Grand Fleet show up? They defeat Kaido here and they hurt Big Mom. Don't necessarily defeat her, but say she just pulls back, not because she doesn't feel capable herself, but because she's like, oh, this is Kaido's territory. His territory is losing. I'm gonna pull my troops out of here so I don't lose my troops, and then we'll just capture them on the way out. And then say if the Grand Fleet has shown up, Hydrogen's like, hey, Elbath is nearby. Let's head to Elbath and recover. Then we get a conclusion to the Big Mum storyline there. We have the Grand Fleet showed up, big, like, it's it's sort of weird whether or not they're going to show up for the final arc or if they're going to show up for something like this, because if Luffy and the Straw Hats win, they are essentially certified Yonko crew. Even if one on one they don't individually equal all the Yonko, they're no different to a full fledged Yonko crew because they have defeated a Yonko crew to crew. It'll be
That is
interesting.
pretty fair. Yeah.
That being said, so as we are talking about Sanji before and how his suit has gone back to a suit, I think I'm going to double down now. And if that is his raid suit, or even if it isn't, I kind of feel like solidified now in the sense that Usopp is going to return to the Soga King route, or maybe even change it up a bit. Maybe we get a Sugo God, Sniper God instead of Sniper King. Um,
Mm.
Obviously, last time he had a mask on and his cape. It'd be very interesting if Sanji had the cape removed from the raid suit and the mask removed for it to become a normal suit, and Usopp has adapted it into his repertoire. Because we know that out of everyone on the crew, Frankie and Usopp are the ones that dabble with technology the most. Dare say Usopp is the one that collects the most sort of trinkets on their journeys to adapt into his sort of fighting skills. I mean, we've seen that with the dials from Skypiea, and that was the last major power up outside of the time skip that Usopp had.
So, it's pretty interesting. One thing that I wanted to mention about Usopp actually, last time we had a chat, but I never got to it, was I noticed that when you see him sitting on the ship, it's probably been on his ears for a very long time, and I
His
haven't really
earphones.
clicked on it. But yeah, he basically has earphones made out of dials, which to me essentially is constantly taking in noise and then amplifying it and then sending them into his ears. He basically has like amplifiers on his ears constantly, and I think that as well could help pretty well with things like haki, right? Because if you can hear things even louder and then you can use haki to sense like specific things inside that audio, you could like figure out things like direction and distance purely through audio, which would be pretty interesting. And honestly, like let's say the Straw Hat crew members start fighting start fighting the supernova people, like Usopp against Sound Guy would be pretty interesting.
I
Like
mean,
they're both pretty much like ranged sniper type characters. And like if Usopp could hear the sound coming towards him, like from like the smaller sound waves before the major sound waves that actually do damage arrives, he could basically dodge them with perception haki that is like different from normal perception haki.
let me throw
You know what I mean? Like audio
this.
based perception
Let
haki.
me throw this out here for you as well. The speed boosters of the raid suit's feet. What if he's attached those to his Kabuto, to his slingshot? So now he gets a massive buff up in defense. He's unlocked observation haki, so now that he's got his defense up and he's not going to get one shot by everyone he comes across in a fight, he's got the durability to start working on being able to actually utilize his observation haki, and he gets a massive buff in his attack because of the speed of the shots.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I could definitely see it. Um, that's another really interesting thing is like, where do you think, I don't know. So I know that we've both kind of considered that somewhat towards end of series. Eventually, we're gonna see Usopp step up as kind of like the number four. Assuming now you're excluding Luffy, so you've got the three monsters being Jinbe, Zoro, Sanji, and then you have Usopp like just below them, essentially like stronger than everyone else. Maybe Brook is pretty strong as well, but like I feel like we've both kind of considered that Usopp
Usopp might
eventually is
step
going
up
to
to
get
the
a
occasion.
significant power up, yeah, and start fighting some really tough guys. Like we've always when we're deciding our like end of series matchups, we always let Usopp fight someone who's pretty significantly strong. So
I mean, if
what do you think
we
is going to be required for him to get there? Because I feel like after we have Luffy learning all these different types of hakis, then we have Sanji learn it, then and Zoro learn it. Like eventually, like giving power buffs to the Straw Hats just by giving them a bit of haki. I feel like they're going to be such like low level stuff that they're only going to start happening until after it's basically required. Like for example, I feel like we're only going to see people like Brook and Frankie and Usopp get armament haki at points where it's basically just like everybody has armament haki and it's not even a big deal, and they won't even make a big deal out of it. It'll just be kind of like, yeah, I picked this up, like you guys always already have it, and now I
I
have it too.
I can understand that, and that might even it might even be the case where it never happens because they don't ever have a need or a desire to do it. For
Yeah.
example, you could have a substitute for Haki for pretty much all the other Straw Hats outside of the monsters and Luffy now, just for the simple fact of their fighting style. For example, if we actually take a genuine look at it at the moment, we'll work our way up, I guess. Chopper's monster point was so strong that he was one-shotting CP9 members pre-time skip. Yeah,
Yeah.
he now can control that. So if we argue, for argument's sake, say Chopper's the weakest on the crew, or even if he's not, we'll work our way from bottom of the barrel in bounty up. Chopper, being the weakest individual member on the Straw Hats, is CP9 level. Since post time skip, he can control monster point. All right. If we take another step up, the next person I think is Nami at 66 million berries. Well, okay, Nami's latest power up is she's got a brand new climb attack that can stretch, and she has Zeus. So she has a Yonko level attack, and she's a glass cannon. I mean, realistically,
It's pretty powerful.
that is an insanely impressive feat. Okay, so going up the
Here's the
chain.
thing though, like even without just Zeus being the Yonko level attack, she doesn't necessarily have to have Zeus just flying above her attacking. She could ride Zeus the same way that Big Mom rides Zeus, and she could just use her normal attacks on top of Zeus, meaning she's not a glass cannon. She's extremely mobile and hard to hit,
Yep.
and has decent damage through whatever lightning attacks she can use.
Not just that. There's no reason why Nami couldn't actually, even if she couldn't ride Zeus, essentially manipulate Zeus into sort of like a storm around her.
Oh, it's
Um,
very possible.
Going up again, we have Brook as the next lowest bounty. Brook is a decent swordsman. His soul fruit ability has gotten a lot of buffs from the time skip. That being said, do you even necessarily need Haki if you can interact with the soul? We haven't really seen how Haki and the soul abilities sort of interact with each other. I mean, Brook's got the ability to pull ice out of nowhere, essentially from the underworld. We don't know how this sort of matches up against people or how it interacts with them because we have had such a minimal showcasing of Brook. Past
Yeah,
that,
we've really seen Brook as just like walking past people and then they get cut up, but they're always fodder. It's pretty.
he's the fastest straw hat. That's confirmed in a 50-meter race. He's the fastest straw hat. Uh, that's impressive. He's the speedster of the crew. Next up, 94 mil. We have Frankie. I'm just gonna turn around and say, has everyone forgotten about the fact that Frankie has Kizaru's laser technology now as part of his combat ability?
Yeah, I think what Frankie boils down to is more just an artillery unit at this point, because the thing is that Kizra's lasers are very destructive and very powerful, but it's not like he can dash around at light speed and fire them off. And Kizra's got his melee kicks and whatnot. I'm sure Luffy could just punch Frankie and just completely destroy all of the metal that's made out of his
Do
body.
you
He's not that
remember? Well,
tanky
let
necessarily.
me put this image into your mind. In the Marineford War, we had the walls. I'm pretty sure they were made of Wapple metal. They might not have been. That could just be me, putting things together that aren't necessarily true. Uh, we,
Made out of some kind of strong
we,
metal, yeah.
we we have that reinforced steel that was able to block Whitebeard's Quake ability. Why is there? If there's a metal that's able to do that, even if it's layered upon layered, there's no reason why Frankie isn't able to necessarily adapt that into a smaller format into Shogun Frankie. In which case, when he's in his normal form, he's reasonably strong. When he's in Shogun Frankie form, he's actually fairly powerful. We've already seen him be able to survive a missile from Baby Five and things like that. And realistically, that's fairly impressive.
Yeah, honestly, I can see him getting like big father level.
Yep.
But I don't. Essentially, like big father level, but he's shooting lasers.
And we don't even we
But the
don't even
thing
need
as
him
well
to
is
be
that Big
stronger than
Father
that.
isn't necessarily going to box you out. Big Father is basically a massive artillery unit, right?
Well,
He's a giant tanky artillery unit.
he's
That's what I see Frankie being.
that's 350 mil though. That's what the price we're putting on
But
Big
yeah,
Father's head. If Frankie makes it to 350 mil, that's over Oven and Daifuku, and I mean, realistically, like that's a sizable threat.
yeah,
Past that, we have
Frankie definitely
Robin.
has potential.
Um, uh, Robin would be insanely impressive if she got former Haki. I know a lot of people want her to get Armament Haki because she'd be able to absolutely destroy people from a distance and that. I personally think it would be more beneficial for her to actually have Observation Haki, so she would actually be able to use her fruit ability in a more versatile manner, potentially even in places that she can't physically see.
I could definitely see that. I think, yeah, honestly, I think she's just very, very interesting. Um, I find that anyone that's like really, really scary though, like as soon as she summons an arm, they cut it. Oops, she's now got a cut
Well,
arm.
I'd like to point out she stopped Hakuba, who Hakuba is 350 million as well. No, 300. Cavendish has got a bounty of 330 million, the same as Sanji. So she stopped someone of Sanji's level. She completely bound them and negated them. I mean, like, she's fairly impressive. If you throw some observation haki in there, which, based on her being an archaeologist and that as well, it would be more realistic for her to unlock it than some of the lower tier people on the Straw Hats crew. Um, it would be interesting to see. Past that, we've got Usopp. We've already talked leagues about Usopp, but I mean, I'm just going to throw this out here as well for him to stack onto his abilities. We are in Wano, the land of Sea Prism Stone. If we give this dude a power up by giving him a upgraded Kabuto with, say, Vinsmoke enhanced projectiles, and then you start throwing some Sea Prism Stone in with that, you have a guy that's stopping some top tier Devil Fruit users, just catching them off guard, especially if he's got the aspect of the raid suit that can turn invisible. We don't know necessarily how it would work. It might play sort of like that scene in Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, where Sam and Frodo fall down in the front of the Black Gates and they throw their cape over them and they just look like a boulder. You know what I mean? Um, Sanji's might have the suit so he can turn his full body invisible. Usopp might have the cape so he can cloak himself, sort of like the invisibility cloak from Harry Potter, but like it's limited by it being a cape. Um, Past Usopp, we get to the monster trio. Sanji, he just needs a boost in arm and haki, really. Like that's his main forte that he needs. Zoro, I could go on for days about Zoro. I feel like Zoro's biggest shortcoming is just the ridiculous fact that, I mean, rightfully so, he's overconfident, but he's so much of a tank that he loses fights unnecessarily because he just thinks I can muscle through this, and that doesn't work in the new world. Pre-time skip, people like Zoro were insanely powerful. They were insanely durable. They could take an incredible amount of punishment. But post-time skip, we're getting to such the minute percentage of like super strong people. Like we've talked about this before, where someone like Don Chinjiao is considered continental level because they can just split a continent in half, right?
Yeah.
You have someone like Zoro who pre-time skip could take a massive air explosion and all the pain from Thriller Bark, and you're like, man, he's so strong, but he gets stabbed in the shoulder by someone like Killer and bleeds out, and people are like, oh, that's so unrealistic. It's like, well, you don't know how strong that person is now in comparable damage. I mean, we've seen Zoro be able to cut mountains in half. Why?
Yeah.
Like we don't know how strong that cut was, or like how precise and damaging it was. I mean, could have gone straight through an artery for all we know. And it's just a matter of Zoro's got the physical brawn. He just doesn't have the battle intelligence to be more defensive and to not get hit as much. Jinbei, we don't really have much to gauge on Jinbei. Like he's sort of just like the most stagnant Straw Hat to date. I don't think he's necessarily going to get any stronger, but I don't see him getting any weaker.
I just kind of see Jinbei as being what he is. I mean, he's a pretty significant fighter right now. He has like all types of haki. He can block punches from Yonko. I don't see him needing to get any stronger. I think right now, um, all we might see is just like bouts of courage from him, and that's about all. I don't necessarily think he's going to go, I've now unlocked the next level of haki or whatever. I think we're just going to see him like fight a
Well,
little bit harder and then fight a little bit
I
easier.
don't think he necessarily needs it for the sole reason that he's got his Fishman Karate. Why would you need to unlock something like Rio when you can just bypass their haki anyway using the water in their body, which we've seen him be able to do to people?
Yeah. He essentially does have like innate Rio. I mean, he's pretty interesting. Like, he's obviously a very, very strong character. Um, I just don't feel like the Straw Hats necessarily need too many more like godlike power ups. Like, I don't think we should really necessarily expect um, characters like Nami to be like, super god tier powerful, where they're like, controlling entire weather storms, and like anywhere she goes, the weather goes with her, and all this like crazy stuff. I just feel like they're just going to get like fairly more powerful. I was thinking about this today, and it was essentially like when we saw Luffy come back from the time skip, he got so much insanely stronger to the point where he dodged and then one shot a pacifista, and it was like nothing. It was like super low diff, right? Like he was way, way, way stronger. But then the thing is that he could barely use Gear 4. Like you can barely even really credit him with having Gear 4. Um, and Gear 4 versus his base form was so insanely stronger than him to the point where he needed Gear 4 to even slightly contend with like Gear 3 level threats, and sorry, with third division commander level threats, and even like warlords like Dofi. Like it was pretty insane the difference between post time skip Luffy, who was so much stronger than pre time skip Luffy, and then, but realistically, compared to people like the third division commanders and stuff, he was just fodder until he goes into Gear 4.
I
Then he
mean,
gets stronger.
yeah, and Gear Force is an insanely good power up. As we know at the moment, Luffy's getting so much better mastering control with it to the point where once he fully starts to be on track with Gear 4, I feel like the next step is just awakening. Really, it's the safer alternative. But
Yeah,
like,
I find yeah, I find we need to kind of we've had enough um Haki buffs for him since the time skip. I feel like most of his power progression has just been getting better with Haki, getting better with Haki. And I feel like now we kind of need something more
I
with
feel
the
like
fruit.
the last
But
two
I find
things
Gear
Conquerors.
4 hasn't really been overdone yet. Whereas before Gear 4 was introduced, Gear 2 and 3 was just kind of like it was very casual to us. You know, we'd been seeing him go into Gear 2 and 3 for years, and it was pretty just like, yeah, meh, he's in Gear 2 again. Whereas now like he's in Gear 4, it was like a really big thing every time he went into it. But I think during this fight it's going to be like, yeah, okay, this is just casual now. He's always in Gear 4.
I
And
mean,
then later on we might get like another gear kind of thing. But I feel like for this fight, what you were saying, like the awakening is probably where his next power up is going to come from.
I don't know. Like, it's Awakening or Conqueror's Haki that's the next viable step. I feel like Conqueror's Haki itself needs a whole arc though, building up
Yeah,
with
so
that.
the thing with Conqueror's Haki is we don't actually know how it strengthens you during a fight. Like people talk about it, like if you have Conqueror's Haki, it means you have so much more potential to be like the strongest in the world. And like if you don't have it, you're basically just like never going to be like top tier. Um,
I
but
personally,
it's
I've
weird because we don't see Conqueror's Haki doing anything in major fights that we've actually had explained to us. All we've seen it is wipe out a bunch of fodder.
I
Which
have
realistically, if you have a big enough army, you don't need to worry about fodder. They kill the fodder for you.
I have a little meta theory about Conqueror's Haki where I think that one of the innate abilities of it is it fatigues your opponent. And we haven't seen it used yet because every time we've seen people with Conqueror's Haki clash, we've actually seen a Conqueror's Haki clash where the Conqueror's Haki sort of, both being activated at the same
Mm.
time and putting up a sort of pseudo barrier between them in their fight. Where in the long term, I mean, it would be very interesting if this is right, where whoever gets off their Conqueror's Haki first sort of starts to drain the stamina or the mental fatigue of their opponent before the fight even starts, or continuing it on with the fight going on.
I think that's very possible. I just find that Conqueror's Haki kind of has to have some insanely unique aspects
It
to it
and it
that
has to
kind of
be
it changes all other forms of Haki in some way.
it has to be Yonko level as well, for the fact that Shanks needs to be able to compete with these top tier people. And as we have been told in supplementary data, Shanks has mastered all three kinds of Haki. So there's got to be something to make up for a lack of Devil Fruit and a lack of being born a just pseudo monster.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because Shanks is someone who is genuinely just like a standard human, just like a man. Whereas you have people like giant Kaido, like like massive people who are insanely physically strong and have incredibly broken devil fruits. And you can imagine like Shanks essentially like blocking their blows, probably not necessarily like their massive giant hits. Just because of like matchup wise, I assume Shanks is a bit faster as opposed to as strong. But like, I mean, you see Shanks block people like Akiyunu, who was fighting toe to toe with people like Whitebeard. Like you've seen Shanks block Whitebeard's attack. Even if it's just like a fairly casual clash, like these people are like Shanks somehow is physically, muscular wise, physically as strong as these Yonko, or at least close. And that's really, really interesting because you would never assume Luffy, especially not with Gear 4 or Gear 3, where he's much bigger, where you've got like Luffy in normal form. You're never going to assume that he's going to be able to catch like punches from like Big Mom. Like you just don't think he ever will in normal form. I'm thinking like he's going to be Gear 4 clashing, equaling her out because now he's got stronger Haki because his hand is the same size as her hand and he's got the same mass. But then you have people like Shanks who seemingly doesn't change form at all and he just kind of
Finesses.
outboxes people. Yeah. It's really interesting
Um,
how how that Haki is going to kind of, and I think it's going to be a similar thing, like kind of like an untold thing, like you don't ever really hear it mentioned, but it has been mentioned in shows like Naruto, where like the more chakra you have, it kind of strengthens your body, and that's why you have like people like Naruto tanking these massive hits that would like wipe out like mountainsides, um, which is pretty crazy because without that fact, like without knowing that fact, you think like, well, yeah, maybe they can like destroy a mountainside, but like if they get stabbed by a kunai, they die. You know, like it's pretty weird how like without that kind of like random extra buff, yeah, basically they're like they're like one shot. They're all glass cannons, and I think that's very similar in One Piece, where kind of not necessarily just armament hockey, but just generally kind of the more hockey you have, more experience you are as a fighter, makes you a tougher person. Because for example, like Luffy getting like one shot by Kaido, like you know, pre-time skip Luffy getting taking that same hit would just explode into meat. Like you wouldn't think that he's ever going to tank that blow, right?
No.
Because he can tank blows now from people who probably would have like one shot him in the past. And it's like, where does that come from? Does his skin get thicker? Does his rubber get stronger? We haven't heard of that
Seemingly, it
happening.
would have to be Haki.
Yeah.
Um, you're in the live stream chat thread, yeah?
A chat thread. No, I'll jump into it now. Yep.
All right. So, just thinking about this now that Blackbeard has been, now that Jinbei has been introduced again as the Straw Hats and reintroduced, confirmed as Straw Hats helmsman. I just wanted to pick your brain about your current thoughts of the Straw Hat matchups against the Blackbeard Pirates.
All right. So who I'm thinking is going to go up against who?
Yes, because I've got my own like rough little ideas about everything, but that being said, I feel like there's a sort of straight line being drawn between some people.
Okay. So it's really difficult to say because I'm probably going to change my mind within a week of this kind of stuff. Um, oh, I don't know. Essentially, see, I would like to see Usopp going up against the Giant, Sam having like a
Sanjan
David
Wolf.
versus Goliath. Yeah, I'd like to see like a David versus Goliath type thing. But at the same time, I mean, Blackbeard has a perfectly good sniper in his team that is would be really interesting to see a battle
Well,
between.
there's a possibility of a 2v2 there. So you could have the sniper ride. You could have Van Auger riding Sanjan Wolf while you have Usopp and someone else tag teaming them.
Yeah, I mean potentially Frankie unveils like a giant ultra mega suit and then you've got like ultra mega Frankie with Usopp riding him and like say Frankie builds in a sniping tower into like the shoulder plate of his suit. Um that'd be pretty interesting and that could be like a way that they fight as like giant Frankie and then the sniper god on his shoulder.
Hmm.
Um I don't know. It could be pretty interesting. I know that you have kind of a thought that's slightly different, but I kind of have to see Zoro fighting the swordsman. I
So
just want it to happen to such a degree. I find that like a lot of things are probably going to happen before um, we come to this battle. I don't think the Straw Hats are going to go up against the Blackbeard Pirates. Um, I don't potentially like someone is going to take down Mihawk before they even clash. So I'm thinking potentially it's either like a fight to see who realistically is the world's strongest swordsman or something along those lines. I know that he has the invisibility fruit and it'd be very interesting for someone like Sanji to fight him because he's like, that's the fruit that I always wanted, but now I have invisibility as well. And it'd be kind of like weird and wonky to see invisibility versus invisibility. But I just see swordsman versus swordsman, the classic duel. Um,
well, okay.
I just find that to be
Let
pretty
me
interesting.
let me throw this sort of thinking at you, right? So I've obviously had mixed feelings about it in the past, but in terms of Jinbei and Sanji and Zoro, especially in Wano at the moment, there's a possibility that Sanji and Zoro actually don't surpass Jinbei, right?
Right?
In that case, he's the second strongest Straw Hat outside of Luffy. There is a very strong possibility, and I think it's pretty clear cut that we're going to get a fight between Burgess and Jinbei. If it's hard, right? Because obviously there's a lot of other possible matchups in that, and a lot of people like to go, well, Zora's the first mate, so Zora's got to fight the first mate. A lot of people think Shiryu's the second strongest of the Blackbeard Pirates. I personally think that it could be Burgess or Shiryu. There's arguments for either. Technically, we haven't seen Shiryu do anything outside of having the invisibility fruit now that we haven't seen Burgess do as well. You know what I mean?
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm thinking, regardless of what happens, Burgess still needs a fruit, and I think
Yes.
he will get one. So I I think it very heavily depends on what kind of fruit Burgess gets. There is a reasonable possibility that, say, like, I know that a lot of people wouldn't want it to happen, myself included, but say Sabo even dies yet again, like another one of Luffy's brothers dies, and then his fruit is now gone again, and then potentially Burgess gets his hands on the flame fruit, like he always wanted, and then you essentially have fire versus water, a typical clash. You've got Jinbei versus Burgess, fighting him essentially the same way that he fought Ace, and giving dialogue around like, you're not as strong as Ace, or you're not as good with this fruit, or etc., or like, I've fought your fruit before, or something like that. And then you've also got, in that same vein, you have Blackbeard essentially taunting Luffy, flaunting off that his crewman has his brother's fruit, and essentially saying, I'm responsible for both of your brothers dying. That would really trigger Luffy. But even then, like, even if, say, Sabo doesn't go out like that, possibly, people have theorized that he could get Marco's fruit, therefore be like insanely durable. There's been plenty of like little theories that have happened. Like, it's possible even that, like, maybe Marco's fruit has this one weakness where if you get the fruit wet, then the fires of healing can't activate, and so Jimby's a perfect matchup for him. Who knows? I think what's going to happen is we're going to kind of make up our minds on who should fight who, and then it's all going to change because they're all going to have different fruits than what we think they have, and they're all going to be in different positions than we think they are.
Well, okay, think about
Yeah.
this for a possibility, and it's something that I only just thought of. Um, what about the possibility that what about the possibility that Burgess and the fruit that the Blackbeard Pirates is actually going after is actually Kuma's fruit?
Can you say that again?
What if the possibility that the warlord related thing that the Blackbeard Pirates are currently on the move for
Right.
is Kuma's fruit? And
Kuma's fruit.
what if the thinking behind it is give Burgess, who prides himself as the champion, give him Kuma's fruit, which would be a good brawling fruit.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, it definitely would be a really good brawling fruit.
Now, think of this. It's also the added effect that the first mate of the Blackbeard Pirates would also be able to negate damage then for the rest of the Blackbeard Pirates, since we know that you can remove people's pain and fatigue. On
Right, that
top
would
of
be
that,
interesting.
it'd be very, very interesting since Burgess is the first mate or captain of the first ship, but he's also the helmsman of the Blackbeard Pirates. A battle between Jinbei and Burgess, a battle between two warlord abilities, right?
Yeah.
With Jinbei sort of not reminiscing, but sort of thinking back to like, this is Kuma's fruit. You have Kuma's ability. It's no different to if I was fighting
Another
Bartholomew
thing that I'd
Kuma
like to point
himself.
out is that Kuma was the first in command, or I guess the second hand, which is what they call it, of the Revolutionary Army. So
Yes.
you've got the first mate of the Blackbeard's crew, who calls himself an admiral, and seemingly is like, I'm going to be the pirate king. Like, he's seemingly trying to essentially establish himself as not just another of the Yonko.
But
Seemingly, he
above.
wants to establish himself as like another major power in the world, as in on footing of the world government versus the Revolutionary Armor, army versus Blackbeard and his armada. Like
So
seemingly he's trying to be equal to those people, and so it would be pretty interesting having first crewman on the same having the same fruit as the previous first in command of of the Revolutionary Army.
well, think of it like this, right? Imagine the water versus air matchup.
Yeah.
Could you just like aesthetically imagine Jinbei throwing his water punches and manipulating the water with Burgess throwing out the paw pad cannons?
I could definitely see that. And the thing is, as well, is that Burgess already has had an aesthetic of firing shockwave blasts from his punches and his elbows. And so I could just imagine that being simply like replaced
Well,
with the paw powers being
this
firing out condensed air from his paws.
this might upset a lot of people, and it probably will make a lot of people sort of like you know, oh no, that's not how it is. You're wrong. Blah 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 blah. But it Burgess does have Rio.
Think he has the actual Haki ability of Rio?
Yes, he does. We've seen him actually utilize it. I'm not talking just to. I'm talking about base Rio to start with. I'll drop a picture for you if I can find it. But
As in Hakiing up like other objects.
yes. So we know he's
I
at
mean,
least got the
yeah.
ability to haki up other objects, which it is what it is. But then separate to haking up other objects, we've actually seen him uh, do shockwave abilities in that. Obviously, he wasn't able to touch Sabo from what we know in Dressrosa. I'm not sure entirely if when Sabo reappeared and Burgess threw those punches at him, if he actually knew it was Lucy at that point in time. He might not have known he had the flame fruit. I'd have to double check that. But we definitely have seen Burgess using Rio. Where is it? Oh, it's not there. Hang on a second. To the point where actually the first time I think we actually saw Rio be used properly was actually against Sabo and Burgess. Here we go. I've got it saved here. All right, you see this in the chat?
In now.
So if you actually have a look there, Burgess has got Rio, so he's armament harking up his armor, which is not part of his body. And we actually see the prolonged clash here, where Sabo engages in armament haki. Both of them are stagnant. Neither one is getting an advance in their haki while it's clashing. But then seemingly Sabo uses advanced Rio there to crack the armor past the normal armament haki up of Rio.
Right.
So
Yeah, I see that.
so it, Burgess obviously got outclassed there, but it might also be that it was just we don't really know how strong Sabo is. We know he's clashed with
Here's a
admirals.
point actually that I'd like to make. Although we've been calling this thing Rio, this ability,
That's just the
it
one name
is
for it.
exactly that is just the Wano name for it, and essentially it could manifest in many different ways, similar to how we were talking last time we had this chat about how perception hockey seems to manifest in different ways. Some people think about people's feelings. Some people see the future. Some people can see wide areas at a time, things like that, and sense people's power levels. So essentially, like this could just be a different way that it's developed. And so what I'm going to say from Sabo is Sabo's hockey ability, quote unquote, does seem to be along the same vein as Rio, but it may be slightly different in the sense that he could potentially only use it while he creates his dragon claw, and he potentially activates it in a certain way. Like maybe he fires it out like a needle, like he kind of like takes the haki from each of the tips of his fingers of his dragon
And
claw,
launches it in
like
so it's more
condenses it into the
finite.
middle. Yeah, and has like a basically like a blade of haki. There could be plenty of different things like that. We've seen like Rayleigh essentially create somewhat of a laser beam with either conquerors or armament haki or a combination of both. And so like all these different things can kind of manifest in different ways. And so for somebody like um for somebody like what the hell, I forgot his name, the helmsman man, um the guy that's on screen right now.
Burgess.
Blackbeard's first in command. What's his name?
Burgess. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Burgess.
Sorry, you might cut out for a bit.
Burgess.
Yeah, something like Burgess, like Burgess's haki ability right there, while it is Rio, it could be completely different from the Wano Rio that fairly seemingly quite directly translates into being able to use what Luffy's Rio is. Like for example, the
The
Flower
advanced
Sword guy.
Rio, the ability to imbue it out of your body.
Exactly. So like for for the Flower Sword guy, he essentially explained it as all samurai learn how to use this in their swords. Sometimes if you get really advanced with it, you can just send it outside of your body, right? That's basically how he explained it. Whereas armament harking up a bit of armor could be thought of like the kind of the thought process of that and how you go around developing that technique could be entirely different from how um like the samurai use it. And so the next natural step for him from imbuing his arm with from imbuing the metal in his arm with haki might not necessarily be Rio as we know it. It might be something different, right? Like
Well,
he might be able to add haki into the air shockwaves that he sends out to have like haki blast or something. Like that could be like the natural next progression because he's seemingly like possibly coming up with these techniques on his own and developing them him on his own. It could be that his kind of haki manifests in a different way, similar to how we see like Luffy has over the course of the 2 year time skip was just kind of playing around with how to apply his haki in within his gears, and he ended up having like a weird pattern going all through his body, covering part of his body but not other parts. And he somehow managed to use his haki to like manipulate his own body, which seemingly we haven't necessarily seen as
well,
much.
I
And then you've got
feel
things like Katakuri being able to use haki to turn his fists into like cubes.
so.
Um,
This brings up a whole bunch of other
so
points,
yeah,
right? Where like, in terms of Luffy's gear for Armament Haki, I feel like that Armament Haki is something that we'll touch upon later in the series. But we saw Katakuri using it for his Dice Mochi, where he maintained a physically sharp and hard, blunt object with it still remaining the properties of his fruit being sticky. We also saw it against the clash against Big Mom and Luffy, where in the manga it implied that Big Mom almost pulled energy out of Luffy, pulling him out of Gear 4, whereas the anime was very different. Again, even as simple as this Burgess panels on screen, the way the anime portrays it is he's got a device in his elbow that creates sound and he shoots out sound waves that does tremendous damage. But if you actually look in the manga, if you look at the lower picture here, it's seemingly a technique where he holds his arm and he focuses his energy into his elbow and he sends out the projectile from his elbow. It's a blunt force projectile, which is no different to a flying sword slash from what we've seen in the manga.
it's very interesting. And the thing is that like we've seen smaller things like Luffy punching so fast in Gear 2 Gatlings that it's seemingly like he's not even actually hitting his opponent. He's just kind of like stopping short and sending out little shockwaves to hit these opponents. Like lots of little things.
They've
But
been peppered
like
through the story.
yeah, it's really interesting. But basically like my point being that the fact that he can haki up an object, or the fact that say like even to say like a swordsman could haki up an object that didn't come from Wano. Let's say you're just kind of a random swordsman and you're learning how to use haki, and you just kind of think, I wonder if I could make my sword stronger, and you train and focus on that for a few years, and then you learn how to like apply haki onto your sword. Doesn't necessarily mean that through training with that you're naturally going to progress onto being able to project it. And so like essentially it's kind of like if you learn how to use haki in a certain way, if someone teaches you haki in a certain way, you can potentially learn that way of how to use haki. But otherwise, if you're just kind of teaching yourself, your haki can kind of manifest in a multiple different ways, similar to how Sabo was taught an entire different type of haki seemingly, where yes, he has perception haki, but he specifically uses that perception haki to
To
find the
look for a
weak point in a
core.
certain
Yeah.
object, and then he uses his armament haki Ryu, which is essentially what we know as advanced Ryu, to specifically attack that core. And so it's very interesting how even though he has these advanced techniques, he's only using them in these very specific niche ways that he's seemingly been trained and taught to use them. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It may not necessarily be that he can generally do a standard punch and emit Ryu. It may not necessarily be that he can has like perfect like next level observation haki minus the future sight. It's pretty interesting.
I mean, yeah. Again, like going back to the topic of the like linking it back to the Blackbeard pirates and that, right? If you're actually looking at Burgess here, if you exclude hype and your enjoyment of certain characters more than others and look at it sort of neutrally, you could essentially look at the Sabo versus Burgess fight as what, say, two fourth or third division commander level people without fruits battling over getting a fruit that instantly makes you first commander level.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. And then, you know, that in terms of them, like, they had a reasonably fair fight and multiple clashes and that. Sabo had the upper hand in that because of a better technique, but then you throw the fruit in there and it's just an overwhelm.
He just wins at that point.
Yeah, and it's fair. I mean, like, if you had Cracker versus Katakuri, but Katakuri didn't have the mochi fruit, it would be like, oh, this is a rough fight, but, you know, Katakuri still got future sight, so he's able to dodge and know where Cracker is. But then you throw his fruit in there, and it's like, okay, this is a bit of a wash now.
And here's the thing as well. They seem to imply, okay, this might get a bit of a red hot take, right? They seem to imply that Burgess was like no threat. There was no threat to him whatsoever until Sabo arrived, right? And until like the Admiral and whatnot arrived. But like Burgess seemingly was in there just to get the fruit and get out. He went there alone with absolutely no backup. It's seemingly because they just straight up didn't need it, and he just went in to get the fruit. They seem to set it up as if he was like definitely going to be the victor if it weren't for anyone, like if Luffy or I guess in this case Sabo didn't stop him from winning. They seem to set it up like he would just straight up win, which means they're basically implying that he's stronger than Cavendish, stronger than Barto, stronger than Hadrian,
Don
and all of these
Chinjiao, all of
people.
them.
Don Shinjia, yeah, he's seemingly just going to straight up beat all of these people, and then get the fruit. And it's only because Sabo specifically stepped in, was able to stop him. Potentially even, maybe Luffy would have lost against him. Who knows? I mean, I don't see Luffy cracking out Gear 4 against that dude unless the fight was like really, really drawn out.
Honestly,
Um,
I could see him having to go into Gear 4 to beat Burgess there, but I feel like it would be a wash in Gear 4, the same as it was for Doflamingo.
okay, so here's what my red hot take was going to be. The fact that he went to that island basically alone, not really giving a shit about anything. I'm honestly thinking he was probably, before Sabo arrived and before the Admiral arrived, he could potentially have been the strongest person on that island, including Doflamingo.
Potentially.
He is, after all, the first division commander of an island. And the thing is, do you really think Dofi's beating Sabo? Because I remember us talking about this, and I remember us saying we think now with advanced Ryu, Luffy might be strong, like might be getting stronger than Sabo, but definitely before the Wano arc, I'm pretty sure our opinion was that Sabo is stronger than Luffy, right?
Yep.
And like Sabo could have definitely beaten Doflamingo if he wanted to. It's just that he knew he was intentionally letting Luffy do it because he
I
trusted
mean,
that Luffy would win
it's
that
not
fight.
just that. There were more viable threats on Dressrosa than just Doflamingo. I mean, you had Fujitora there. Fujitora was arguably the strongest person on Dressrosa.
He undeniably was, yeah.
That being said, Sabo pretty much halted him. He put him at bay. Obviously, they weren't fighting seriously, but The
I think
matter
for the
is,
most part, it was just because after he got the flame fruit, he was reasonably untouchable.
well,
And Fujitora wasn't necessarily like, I'm going to go all out and make sure that you get down right now.
the better thing about Sabo is in this situation as well is even though he got the fruit, you actually see in the Fuji versus Sabo fight, Sabo comments going, "Oh, I've been making a bit of trouble for myself here because I keep dodging instead of just relying on the devil fruit ability. I'm not used to having it yet." So
Yeah, exactly.
he's still more skill based than he is like Ace relying on his devil fruit. Which,
Yeah,
if
exactly.
you
And
put
that's
that up
that's a big
against
fall down of a lot of characters.
if you put that up against Doflamingo, putting it into another perspective, Smoker had to protect his crew on Punk Hazard, and he spread himself out wide in his fruit form to absorb an attack that was meant for his crew, and it
Yeah.
decimated him. Sabo, obviously, he doesn't need anyone that he needs to really protect here, but him not relying on his fruit and not using it that much outside of just enhancing the damage of his already base attacks, almost as if it was a paramecia in a way, probably would have put him at a lot more of an advantage in that situation.
Genuinely, he was almost fighting in that situation as if he was the guy from My Hero Academia, the fire guy.
Endeavor.
Endeavor. He was almost fighting like he was Endeavor in that fight. Like he wasn't made out of fire. He just had like the ability to produce fire, essentially.
Well, bringing it back again though, if we actually have a look at Burgess though, and what Burgess has been capable of, where is it? Here. It his projectile elbows is seemingly no more impressive than Shiryu's projectile slashes. One's just a cutting effect, and one's a blunt damage effect. It's like, who does more damage, Luffy or Zoro? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like swords look worse because they have a slicing effect. They make you bleed, but a blunt impact has a lot more other types of damage as well. Outside of that, though,
That's
Burgess
more shock.
Burgess doesn't have a fruit, and Shiryu's got the invisibility fruit. There's not much of a difference in their combative styles, in a way, to say that one's like ridiculously above the other, which is why it's still sort of neutral for me to who's the second strongest on the Blackbeard Pirates crew. I think Burgess will fight Jinbei because the helmsman will fight the helmsman. I feel like Zoro will fight Shiryu because the swordsman will fight the swordsman. And that being said, it'd be a great power up for Zoro to actually start relying more on his observation haki and not just standing there like a tank, copping every hit and actually thinking, I need to dodge, I need to survive, I need to protect myself.
Oh.
Usopp and Van Orga is essentially a done deal for me. How it matches up, I don't know. They might be on the other side of the island shooting each other. They might be just laying down cover fire for their allies. It might be a 2v2. I feel like it'll be very impressive though, because Van Orga's epithet's the supersonic. It'd be very, very interesting if you have him who actually has a quicker shot than Usopp and he's just laying out shots with, if Usopp does have something like the raid suit invisibility and like enhanced projectiles, having Usopp turn invisible. Say you have Sanjan Wolf and Frankie fighting and you have the two snipers on their shoulders shooting each other. It'd be very funny having an invisible Usopp jumping from side to side, taking shots at Van Orga, and Van Orga sees a projectile start coming out of nowhere and has to start shooting at it, or even if the projectiles are invisible. Going to Lafitte, the demon sheriff, I've seen people say that potentially they want to see Nami fight him. I think his fight would be against Sanji. And this would be very interesting because he's got an unnamed zone as of the moment. We don't really know how strong he is, but we know that he was able to stealth blitz into Marineford pre-time skip into the same room as Tsuru and I think Sengoku and the Warlords. So he's got genuinely some skill under his belt. You know what I mean?
he does seem like a pretty nasty threat. He seems some kind of like angel or death or whatever. Um, yeah, some weird form of like
Well,
Reaper type thing. It's pretty
I
interesting.
think his ability might focus on speed. We also know that
Yeah.
he's got hypnotizing abilities. He was able to hypnotize the Gates of Justice to let the Blackbeard pirates come and go to Impel Down.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see Sanji, who's being more teed up as a more empathetic person, fighting someone that manipulates people. Both of them have the ability to fight in air. Both of them are sort of speedster base. We don't know if Sanji will keep his invisibility. I'd like to say he would, but it'd be interesting to see how it matched up with that. If, say, because of how fast Lafitte is, or how stealthy Lafitte is, he might have actually had a very good sense of observation haki and just been able to sense where people were.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I
Um,
fully understand. I could definitely see them fighting. The thing is that the strength levels of everyone below the people that we've just talked about is pretty up in the air. We don't necessarily know who fights more and who fights less. Well, like when you see things like, for example, if I was looking at the Straw Hat crew, completely not knowing, and in their kind of like battle forms, completely not knowing who's strong and who isn't, I would almost definitely I'd probably put Chopper at a fairly higher level, and I'd probably put like Nami like at the bottom because realistically, all she looks like is a girl holding a weird staff, right? Um, I would place like people like Frankie and like Chopper as being like decent fighters, but not like top tier. But then I would look at someone like Brook, and I would assume they're like a really good fighter, right? Like a skeleton with soul powers who has like a cane sword, and he's like really quick. That to me would scream like he's really
he's
really
a threat.
strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like honestly though, he's not. I love Brooks so much, but he's not like a Zoro or a Sanji. You get what I mean? Like I would see Sanji, and I definitely wouldn't put him within the top three monsters. Um, honestly, I would probably put Brook above Zoro just from pure looks. Because like Brook just seems a bit more menacing and a bit more of like a designed character, if you get what I mean. Whereas like Zoro is kind of just like a normal dude, which honestly works good in the story. But like if you're looking at character designs, generally the kind of person who has like a bit more of an out there design is the one that's like a bit stronger or whatever.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but it's pretty interesting because like it's very
Well,
hard to decide who is stronger out of those people.
I
And
actually
especially
think
because we don't know all of their fruits at least.
I'll have to look it up, but I actually think the Blackbeard pirates follow a theme of inverse bounties, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. We got the bounties of the pre-time skip Blackbeard pirates. We also found out that they all had observation and arm and haki. Impressive, yeah. Their bounties though was the most interesting part of it, right? So
Right?
I'll have to look it up, but obviously Blackbeard had a bounty of 0 pre-time skip. He had no bounty at all. I think Burgess had 20 or 40 million. I think Burgess had 20 million. Van Orga had 40 million. Lafitte had 60 million, and Doc Q had 80 or 90 million. I'll have to double check those numbers, but it was actually seeming like the weaker the member, the higher the bounty, because the Blackbeard pirates were trying to stay incognito, essentially.
All right, I could understand that. I get what you mean.
So it might be a matter of the higher the bounty was originally for the Blackbeard pirates, the weaker they are on the crew, because they're just sort of more reckless about how they are conducting themselves. Also, haven't had the chance to discuss with you yet, but have you seen any of the new SBS stuff that's come out?
I haven't, no.
They dropped the designs for the Roger Pirates. They've also talked a bit about, Brook and what his sword would look like if it was a human, and Zoro's lineage.
Cool.
Interesting stuff. I'll have to send it to you. I haven't been able to
Zoro's
find.
lineage giving away anything good?
pretty much what it talks about is Shimotsuki Kurozubo, whatever it is, the swordsmith, left Wano 55 years ago. He founded Zoro's home village in the east, and his son became Zoro's master. And obviously, Kuina is the granddaughter of him. So
Right.
that was the
So
swords.
Zoro himself isn't genetically related.
Well, they actually say, and Zoro's lineage is, and they just leave it blank. I feel like they'll end up linking Zoro back to a Ushimatsu. The guy, the fox that was guarding the bridge, the Benki.
Yep.
You know his master that was in the flashback that we actually haven't seen out of silhouette.
Oh yeah.
That bloodline.
Really? Okay.
Okay. Just trying to find these damn bounties, eh? But yeah, it's interesting stuff because that would give Zoro an ability to be a blood relative of Ryuma as well.
Yeah, right.
Which would make more sense why in Thriller Bark Ryuma when he clashed with Zoro kind of like sensed a successor.
Yeah.
Okay, so the bounties for Jesus Burgess was 20 million. Van Auger's bounty was 84 million. Lafitte's bounty was 42 million. Doc Q's bounty was 72 million.
Right.
So it went Burgess, Lafitte, Auger, Doc Q. With Blackbeard obviously having a bounty of 0. Which would sort of play into that where you have the Impel Down people that would have had high bounties because they all were level 6 Impel Down.
Yeah, definitely.
And with the only other one being Shiryu, who potentially had a bounty of 0 as well, if you were trying to make the case that he's the second strongest on the crew.
Pretty interesting because I don't know. I definitely see Nami fighting the don't like pretty girls chick.
Yes, Katarina Devon. I could see a team up of Nami and So if we're going through, continuing along, like we were saying, I see Chopper versing Doc Q, Corrupt King Avalar Pizarro. I could definitely see if Frankie doesn't fight Sanjian Wolf, I could see him fighting him. If not, I'm not too sure because it's a bit hard in that. Katarina Devon though, I feel like Nami or Robin. I would probably lean more towards Nami, but it could go either way. And what's his name? Vasco Shot. I feel like Vasco Shot versus Brook would be pretty funny if I'm being honest. Him being a drunk in that, it'd be funny if he was, off his head on booze, just about to black out.
You're a skeleton man.
Knocks Brooks' head off and is like, that was real easy. And Brooks just laughing. He's like, man, I must be really drunk. I could see some gags played up there during the fight.
Yeah.
I mean, that being said, though, we also have the 10th Titanic captain that we don't know who it is at all. It very well could be Aokiji. It'd be interesting.
And it could be that there's potentially some other people alongside Luffy when they have that fight, or maybe there's like some more enemies other than just Blackbeard. Maybe there's some Blackbeard and some allied captains that are pretty significant that some of the Straw Hats can peel off and fight, and then maybe some of Luffy's like commanders of his Grand Fleet can fight some of Blackbeard's crew members. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting. The thing is, as well, is that all of these people hold their own fleets, right? So they probably have second in commands as well that might be like half decently strong.
Yeah, I mean, it's questionable. Just talking about just the thought hitting my head. Um, Blackbeard's taken over most of Whitebeard's territory. I wonder what the general perspective is of Blackbeard if they viewed him as the backstabber of Whitebeard. Obviously, we know the majority of the Whitebeard pirates hate Blackbeard, and they had the Grudge War and the Revenge War, but we don't know how that goes down with the Allied captains.
That is very true. Yeah.
Um, a lot of
And I,
people.
I would see them all just loving the hell out of Whitebeard though, and essentially just like
Because
hating Blackbeard
I'm just
because of it.
imagining it in the perspective of like someone like Squad, the dude that stabbed Whitebeard. Like,
Yeah.
if you had him show back up and he's just so easily manipulated that he's now one of the allied captains of Blackbeard, I'd be like, okay, whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Like, yeah, it's possible that they could just kind of be like, well, the strong is the strong. Like, because the thing is that some of them could really, really love him. Some of them could just be like, I mean, he's a good guy and he beat me, so I may as well follow him around because he gives me security. Like, they're not all going to be in like hardcore love with him and like think that he's just the best person ever and like want to die for him. Like, there's probably plenty of people that were just kind of like, he's not abusive like the other warlords, and he'll let me
Well,
be under his flag, which gives me protection, so I'll be with him.
we
And then
know
the same thing happens with Blackbeard. Like, he's not abusive to me, and he lets me be protected by him, so I'm going to join him.
we know a decent minority of those people though used to be on Whitebeard's crew before they left to start their own crews.
Yeah, that is true. I think like there's probably going to be quite a few diehards that just straight up aren't gonna. But the thing is though is that like during the Revenge War and the Grudge War, a lot of those people probably were fighting alongside Marco, and then died or just like gave up all hope and just left to live the rest of their life on some random island, you know. So I mean, like it's possible that like all of the ones that aren't willing to respect him are dead or in hiding, and then the ones that are willing to respect him just didn't join the Grudge War to begin with, and have now joined up with Blackbeard.
I have a question for you. Okay. Um, what does it take to take down a Yonko crew? Not just the
What
allied
does it
captains.
take?
Yeah, like not the allied captains, but like what does it actually take to take down a Yonko crew? So if you to put it in perspective, you know how Luffy's like, oh, Sanji's worth 1,000 men, and Zoro's like, oh, well, I'm worth 2,000 men then.
Alright.
Like, how many and of what, like, how many people would it take, and of the lowest tier possible for it to succeed to take out a Yonko crew?
Well, it's really difficult because I don't see a Yonko getting taken out by any number of fodder because they all kind of have a means of wiping out swaths of fodder in one go.
Definitely.
Like Blackbeard slash Whitebeard have Quake Fruit. Big Mom has Lightning slash Fire, and plus anyone that's scared of her dies pretty much immediately if she wants to just swipe their soul away. Um, what's his name? Shanks can just conquer his Haki. Like they all kind of can just like instantly
Get
like
rid of the
wipe
fodder.
out. Yeah, the fodder that just it doesn't. It's not even an issue for them. So I think the lowest tier. I mean, then my question to you to figure that out would be um, what's required to injure most Yonko? Like not in a one-on-one, but just in order to even have like a 0.001% chance of doing
Doing
some
damage.
form of damage to a Yonko.
I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like all the Yonko you need advanced Rio at least to actually get past their defense.
But then that's another question though, is like, so I guess we're saying other than Whitebeard because he was sick, because there's the whole thing of like he took a whole bunch of bullets and tanked them all,
I mean,
and they were assumedly saying that because they did a tiny bit of damage to him.
yeah.
You know what I mean, because like I'm not going to say that Whitebeard can take on infinite bullets in that scenario, otherwise they wouldn't have even mentioned how many bullets he took.
I mean, I get what you
Like they
mean.
would have just said how many rounds were fired during the whole fight. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the ones that hit him did nothing, if they did nothing.
No, I get what
Would
you
have
mean.
been like BB balls
Because,
hitting you.
like, I'm just thinking about it, right? Like, we say advanced Rio now as if it's like an insanely hard thing to attain, right?
Yeah.
But like, is it really all that hard to get? Is it just that Luffy's not been exposed to it in a learning manner? Just say because even though it's a useful tool, Rayleigh focused on other things for him because he had so much more under his belt. He was like, you know, other things to obtain. Because thinking about it, you have you have da, 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 what's his name? Not Maru. What's the guy that calls Kizaru uncle from Sabaody?
No idea.
Uh,
Oh yeah, right, right. The guy that has like with the pacifistas.
Sentomaru. There we go. I remembered his name. There we go. He was using what seemed to be advanced Rio to not offensively hurt Luffy, but to rebound and force Luffy's fruit to rebound while not touching him in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
We also saw that from the Boa sisters. The Boa sisters only have bounties of about 30 mil. Obviously, they've been frozen since they were about 8 years old, which is. How old is Boa? Is Boa 30?
It's way older than Luffy.
Boa's 29. So 21 years ago is when she had her bounty frozen.
Right.
Oh, that might not be right. Anyway, she was the youngest warlord. She got her bounty when she made her first voyage, and she got accepted into the warlords pretty much straight after that. So she hasn't had a bounty increase in ages. If she was going to have a bounty increase out of all the warlords, she's probably going to have the biggest jump. But her sisters as well, having displayed advanced Rio, they are pretty credible threats in terms of strength in their own right. Obviously, Luffy didn't necessarily beat them up in a fight, but he was able to hurt them and damage them pre-time skip. But it was also a matter of the two of them tripping over each other, fighting, trying to get him, and then it ended in a sort of pseudo-peaceful manner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like, you have people of that skill set, of that strength, that, okay, because they've got a form of Rio or advanced Rio, technically, if they got an opportunity, they'd be able to they'd be able to land a hit that does some form of damage, even if it's minute, on the Yonko.
Yeah. Um, that's interesting. Well then, okay, so if we're taking Adventure Ryu as a, I mean, I guess it depends on the person, right? So obviously Ryu is very, very heavily um helped. So I don't know. I'm essentially saying it would be some ridiculous number, like a couple 100,000 people, as long as they can somewhat hurt a Yonko.
Do you know what,
But
actually?
the thing is like you could have a fruit, like for example, give like Ake Inu's fruit, but then give it to some like absolute fodder person, like just like me, like take me in real life, and like put it in the One Piece universe. I'm just a human, right? Like I'm not like I can't tank a club to the head and get back up. So like, give me his fruit and have me run it at say like Kaido and try and hurt him. Assumedly, if I could put my fist on Kaido with my fruit, I
You
would be able
do
to burn a
damage.
little bit and do a tiny bit of damage. But more than likely, he's going to put a bit of Kaki on his club and just one shot me,
Yeah.
like just obliterate me into the ground.
I feel like I
So
answered my
like,
own question just in thinking about it. There was 100,000 elite Marines at Marineford, and that was what they had rallied together to take out one of the Yonko.
yes, but they had that alongside fleet commanders, admirals, etc.
Yes. Which obviously they did the majority of it, but like again, going back to that tally at the end of Whitebeard's life, that wasn't the admirals, that wasn't the fleet commander. So I guess technically, even if it wasn't to beat them, the safe bet is like Yeah, you need at least 100,000 troops of people that have got at least some type of decent training.
Yeah, I guess I could see that.
I don't know, because it's weird.
Honestly, though, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Shanks goes there. They're all knocked out, just like that. Like Shanks will knock all of them out because Luffy knocked out a fairly significant amount of them with his level of Conqueror's Haki before he even really knew how to use it. So Shanks easily just like knocks them all out, right? Like I don't see
No,
any
I
other thing
can I
about
can see
that.
that.
I can see Vice Admirals potentially getting up. Honestly, I could see Shanks knocking out Vice Admirals as well. But like, let's say maybe if you try to hit that many people, maybe it like slightly weakens it or something. So maybe some of the Vice Admirals can survive. I'd say probably like Momonga and stuff like that would be fine. But like in general, like it's gone. There's like it goes from literally nothing but people, like just a mountain of bodies of people, to just like all of them on the ground, and then there's
Do you know
like
what?
15 people standing up.
Luffy knocked out 50,000 at Fisherman Island, and there was the SBS saying that Rayleigh and Shanks could have knocked out all 100,000. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just blink and knock out an army.
So that's the thing is that like, like what level, like so. In saying that, you would have to be, I guess, like top level vice admiral or greater to even be able to fight Shanks, regardless of getting one shot or not. Only getting knocked out to even be like allowed to fight him, you would need to be like Momonga level plus.
That's kind of scary.
That's pretty insane. And then even then, like, okay, but can like Momonga hurt Shanks?
I mean,
Knows how strong Shanks's armament hockey is. What if he can like do full body armament hockey at all
Momonga
times and it doesn't even look like he's using it? Like some
Momonga was
crazy
essentially one
crap.
shot by Boa, and I put Boa around the second or first commander level.
Yeah, which is, I mean,
They still get
we've
one
we've
shot by the
seen,
Yonko.
yeah, they get one shot by the Yonko. So you basically need like 20,000 Momongas or something like that in order to like just have so many bodies that he can't one shot all of them with his like sword. And eventually they'll wear him down.
So,
That's pretty
um,
insane. But that's
here's
how that scaling works, I guess.
here's a question for you. It's something I've seen going around a little bit. I'll put a photo up, a visual up to go with it, right? Essentially, what are your thoughts on the mythical zones having a hybrid form,
Yes.
or
Right.
not having a hybrid form,
So
or always being in a pseudo sense of hybrid form? My reason for bringing this up is Luffy's obviously learned Advanced Rio because he's talking about, oh, okay, I need to be able to hurt Kaido's scales, but he's only ever fought Kaido outside of dragon form. Like, he seemingly was doing better against dragon form than he was in human form, but a majority of the damage that he wasn't able to do was in human form. In which case he said, oh, I need to use that to get past his scales. So does he have pseudo scales in his human form? Bringing it back, the only other two mythical zones, well, we've only seen three mythical zones: Kaido, Orochi, Marco, and Sengoku. Marco never went into a full-blown hybrid form. He was either humanoid or full phoenix, or he was running around in human form producing fire. Now, my reasoning for asking this is a lot of people have started speculating that there might not be hybrid forms for the zones, or this is another potential idea for it. When you have a mythical zone, you're always in hybrid form. For example, Kaido's horns, we think, oh, he just might potentially be a natural Oni or a non human species to begin with, but it's very well possible that those horns are actually from his dragon fruit, just always being present. The same that Marco,
okay.
when Marco gets shot by Kizaru, we see him use his flames to heal up, and we know those are the flames of resurrection, but because he's a zone, you wouldn't think that like the flames itself is the body of the zone. Then the phoenix itself heals perpetually, as opposed to producing something to then take on to heal themselves.
Yeah.
So
So what would be the physical characteristics that Marco shows then?
Uh,
Because
would oh,
he had that when he was a little kid.
like I was saying, the physical attributes would be the fact that he can make the flames appear as flames when he gets hurt in the human form without transforming into the bird to heal, considering it's a zone.
Right.
There's also the possible effect because we know that the way we've interpreted it in the past is that mythical zones have a special byproduct effect. Sengoku can create shockwaves, Marco can make flames, Kaido, can create clouds. You know
Okay,
what I
here's
mean?
a question that I have then, and it's that um, do you still get somewhat of a strength boost when you have a zone or not? Because when we saw Water 7 and we saw all of the CP0 members as carpenters, sorry, CP9 members as carpenters, they were seemingly like ridiculously physically strong. And then everyone was kind of like, why the hell are they so goddamn strong? And then it turned out that, well, obviously, because they're CP9 members, they're ridiculously strong. But was that them using like Ryu techniques to be physically strong? Or was that their strength being a little bit stronger just because they have a zone in general? Like, do they have to transform into their animal form to have at least some of the strength that they gain?
I don't think they do, but that being said, I think they need to turn into their hybrid form or zone form to use the attributes of their zone.
Yeah.
So they get a natural like strength boost as if they were sort of that animal in all forms, in a very toned down way. But
Yeah.
say Rob Lucci, if Rob Lucci wants to use claws, he then has to go into a pseudo hybrid form or a type of hybrid form to produce claws or go into full leopard.
Yeah, definitely. But that's the thing is that I kind of see um like them having that like attribute of strength. I kind of just see Marco having the attribute of regeneration at all times. Like you said, how like a phoenix doesn't necessarily produce flames in order to heal. They just are made of flames and happen to heal at the same time. It's not necessarily that the flames themselves heal them. It's that they heal naturally as a being, and they also happen to have flames on their body. Like I
Yeah,
feel like a phoenix's flames don't heal you, because the thing is, as well as the way that a phoenix will heal others is with their tears, right? Phoenix tears heal,
in
etc.
normal mythology, yeah.
Yeah. So if it was that the flames specifically healed you, it would be that the phoenix covers you in its flames and then the flames heal you. It
Well,
wouldn't be that it like sheds a tear.
it does.
So I find those two things, the regeneration and the flames, to be separate characteristics of a phoenix. And even though they kind of like to show up together, I think that's more just like a visual representation
A
that he's healing, rather
manifestation
than just like,
because
yeah, rather than him just kind of wear like
we know
Wolverine
he
here.
does have the flames of regeneration that he can use on others to improve their recovery, but it doesn't actually heal them the same way it would heal himself. So it might almost sort of be like a it's hard to explain it, like a pseudo just like medical uh gelatinous blob of energy that he's just like emitting through the flame.
Yeah, right. It's yeah, it's interesting, but I don't know. I feel like that. Yeah, I mean, it's a theory, but I don't think it's necessarily as confounded as people probably
Well,
believe that it is.
what do you think
Um,
Orochi's byproduct would be for his zone? Since we have things like Sengoku produces the shockwaves, Marco essentially can heal others. Kaido can produce clouds to fly or breathe fire or has the scales, however you want to interpret Kaido's one. All the other
right,
mythical zones essentially have something that's attributed to their zone that isn't necessarily turning into their animal like every other zone would be.
right. Well, I would say probably that if you cut his head off, it grows another one.
But wouldn't that just be part of his normal zone's characteristic?
Yes, but I think I'm saying like even in human form, similar to how like even in human form, if you attack Marco, it heals. Even in human form, if you were to cut off his head, he would just grow another
Ooh.
head.
Okay. Okay. Now imagine that at the end of this arc where they defeat Kaido and you have Orochi surrounded begging for his life and all the scabbards take a turn cutting off a head.
Right?
That
That
would
would be pretty interesting.
that would be like, and like each time one of them strikes him down, his head just grows back.
Yeah. And then they have to strike him down again and again and
Um,
again.
it might
It
get
would be
to
kind of like pseudo regeneration. Here's the thing though, with a Hydra, don't they just like their bodies regenerate as well, right? Like if you stab them in the torso, it heals, doesn't it?
with a Hydra, yes, but with the Yamato no Orochi, the mythology for that is, you know, it's got 8 heads and its body spans 8 mountains and 8 valleys, and you know the only thing that ended up killing it was the god Susanoo when he you know he got all the heads drunk and he ended up slaying it to find the a certain sword stabbed into its back that had just been like left there to age.
Right, okay.
That said,
Ooh.
though,
Okay, weird interesting theory that I just thought of. So this is like very, very unlikely. But it's more of just like a I don't think it'll actually happen, but it's more just food for thought. Um the whole thing with Momonosuke has been that he's a little kid. It's like, how can this little kid rule? How's this little kid leading us, etc., etc. He's not strong enough. He's not like Odin. He's just a little kid, right? And his whole thing has been like, I need to get older so I can get stronger and become a strong samurai. What if there's some like BS time manipulation thing happens again? I don't know how. Maybe he has a fruit or something. I don't know.
well, we know
Some
that
kind of time manipulation happens again. He comes back
older.
to the fight older as like a well trained samurai.
We do have Shinobu who has the mature fruit.
Mm.
If we didn't have Bonnie show up, we have her who can age things.
Yeah.
So you could essentially have him aged
So
up. I know a lot of people have talked about that, but I don't know how necessarily I see it because I could honestly almost see
well,
after this arc,
being
Momo doesn't take over Wano. I could see Hiyori taking over the rulership of Wano, and Momo sort of becoming the cabin boy for the Straw Hats.
I kind of I see I don't know. I think I think the reason where I'm getting with it is that the whole point is that the Susanoo blah 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 takes down Orochi, and wasn't there a sword called Susanoo or something
No, the
similar?
sword was Habano Abakiri, which is Hiyori's sword in the manga at the moment. The
Right.
one she gave to Zoro. No, that was Enma.
No, there was
The one that
two. There
Momo
was
has.
two. Yeah. So they gave one to Zoro, and then the other one, which seemingly was the one that was like destined to kill the serpent, was like destined to kill,
Is still
um,
AFK.
is still AFK. And so I could definitely see like Momo coming back with that sword and just being like, "Let's do this," and then taking on Orochi, beating him with that sword, essentially creating like this really crazy story that lives in history, etc. And then he takes over as the Lord, and then boom, you've got Wano as a Lord, and it kind of makes up for the fact that he stayed a little kid for 20 years. You know what I mean? Like he goes away, um, time travels or whatever for 20 years, comes back stronger, and then that way he's essentially grown with Wano. He's like developed with Wano.
It definitely would be very interesting.
I don't know how it would happen though. But no, just be weird food for thought because that's one thing that doesn't sit with me right. Is I don't know why story wise why they would give Zoro the sword that they gave him and not give him the sword that's supposed to slay the
I
that's supposed to slay Orochi.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hell, that's just coming back then to the matchups in Wano and who you think's gonna fight who. Like, who do you think's taking on King? Like, is
Yeah.
Marco coming in as a Deus Ex Machina, and you have Marco versus King, you have Jinbei versus Smoothie, and then you have Zoro, Sanji, Killer.
Honestly, I could potentially see it as a rite of passage for Kid and King. Um,
I
because the
feel
thing
like
is, like, Kid hasn't beaten a first division commander, not even close.
the
Like,
top
Kid's beaten the
three.
fourth.
I feel like the top three. Ooh, what fourth?
Oh, well, not even a fourth. Who did he injure? He didn't even injure a fourth. He just injured some random plebeian.
No, no, no. He injured one of the three Sweet Commanders.
Don't know which one.
Don't know which one. Oh, one of the four Sweet Commanders. It could have been it could have been Katakuri, could have been Smoothie, could have been Cracker, could have been Snack, when Snack still was a commander. But
Yeah.
you know, if
And our no, and I believe our theory was that he injured Snack, and then Arouge came back later and beat Snack again, and then Big Mom was just like, "You're trash," and
alternatively
just
to
threw him
that,
away. So,
Cracker does have a scar on his face. It'd be interesting if, to parallel Kid and Luffy, they both beat the same commander.
oh, that would be interesting. But then at the same time, he hasn't beaten a first division.
Nope. Um,
And the thing is, okay, no. When you say it could have been Katakuri, it wasn't
no,
Katakuri.
because Katakuri hasn't
Katakuri's
been
never been
touched.
beaten or hit.
It,
Yeah,
it was one of those four people though.
yeah, but it can't have been Cat.
No. That being said though, like I feel like Kid, Law, and Luffy bypass all the riffraff, and it's them having to deal with Big Mom and Kaido in a 2v3, manipulating, just jumping around, doing all sorts of like crazy shit.
Yeah, I can see that, but I also see Kid having to kind of have like a rite of passage fight to step up to Luffy's level before they can fight equally.
I mean, it's weird because realistically, even if Luffy, Law, and Kid are strong enough to beat King, obviously they'll have to be if they're going to take on Big Mom and Kaido.
Oh.
I feel like it would still be too long of a fight 1v1 for them to beat King and then to go into the Yonko battle at full health, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what you mean? I don't think they're going to go into the Yonko battle at full health.
If they don't go into that battle at full health, I don't think they can win.
Or do I? But I don't think Luffy's ever gone into a battle full health.
True, but this is also sort of getting to the cap though. Like arguably, the Yonko are the cap in strength at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. Like it seems like the Yonko is like the top tier, and then anything else is like plus ultra, like beyond tier.
Yeah. Um.
By the way, fairly off track, actually quite off track, 'cause it's not even One Piece. But watch the most recent episode of My Hero last night.
Oh yeah.
Man rips his head off and throws it, and then gets burnt up, and then regenerates. But then, as they're fighting, they like fly the dude into the sky, and then he like explodes into fire and like tries to melt the whole person. But it's like they're flying up in the sky for like 15 minutes, seemingly. Like they're flying up in the sky for ages. Why doesn't he just rip his arm off and throw it down again? And then he blows up, doesn't kill him because he regenerates. You know what I mean? Like if he can do that once, he can do that every
So
time.
is
Like,
this Endeavor versus Nami?
every time? Yeah.
Okay,
So
I
it's like
haven't.
every time he's about to burn up, he just rips his head off and throws it.
I haven't
It's
seen
like
the
he would never
episode
lose.
because I spent a majority of the weekend trying to get caught back up on Black Clover's anime.
I know you've read it though, so I know I'm not spoiling.
But I'm being very careful not to spoil you here. Good fight, good moment. Endeavor's fast tracking to become my favorite character in My Hero.
He's
I
pretty cool.
I
He's still a dude, but he's pretty cool.
he's an asshole,
Strong.
but like he's one of those people that it's like you've got a good character arc for him.
Yeah, it's just that like it was very hard to be like impressed and fine because like this is his start as like the new symbol of peace or whatever. But it's like to me it was like he gave it his all. Dude rips his head off and throws it away and survives. And then Endeavor was like, "I'm screwed. I can never beat the guy." That should have been where it ended. But then he's like, "No, I'm gonna go beyond," and decides to keep fighting somehow, even though he's already been beaten. Somehow just gets up and keeps fighting. But then next time he beats him, the Nomu just doesn't rip his head off. Why?
Yeah, I mean, man, you should have seen that in the manga though. That panel was intense, eh? I don't know how they did it in the anime.
It's pretty cool in the anime.
In the
It was
manga,
a good thing. You should
it
watch
was it was Whitebeard's face half melted off intense.
Yeah. I mean, they had like a good scene of like the Nomu like sitting on top of Endeavor. Endeavor's just covered in blood and just laying on his back, like done. Like you're just like how
Yeah,
like
he's out.
he looks literally dead. Like at that point I was like, I wonder if he's actually going to be still alive or not. It'd be kind of
When I
BS if he
first
survives.
read it, I thought he was dead, and I was like, "What the hell just happened? What?"
Yeah, exactly. Because that just sends the message of like even the number one hero just can't do shit. And like while they were fighting, the Hawks guy, who's number two, was talking about how he has no chance of beating the guy because he's not good against power types.
Mm.
So I'm like, it's not just that the number one hero, the new number one hero, gets beaten, but the number two has straight up said, "I can't beat him either." So it's like you're not gonna beat him. No one can beat him.
Yeah. Now, the My Hero Love's good. I obviously it struggles. I'm probably gonna start doing some My Hero chats and that, but it'll be hard because I don't want to spoil anything for you. You know what I mean?
That's fine. I don't mind.
It's good
But
series.
I don't think it has as much of an I don't know. Probably just because I haven't been looking into it.
I just finished uh the Black Bulls have just left and they're going into the flashback at the moment for after the whole Elves arc.
Oh, okay, yeah. I don't think they've really kicked off another arc necessarily.
Yeah.
So just a bunch of random like talking and what's going to happen now.
Um, good. Loved it.
Yeah,
It
good
was
stuff.
good.
So did you binge it all?
Yeah, I did. I realized I had like 15 weeks worth unwatched, and I just put it on while I played Xbox. Had a good
It's good
day.
stuff. One trope in like anime that I kind of find annoying is a character will go from being very ground based, like very like I'm standing here trying to fight you, like very human, to just like getting a slight power up and now they're flying through the sky at like fast like almost
Mock
faster than the
speed.
eye can see. Yeah, Mach speed, dueling someone midair at Mach speed. And it's like come on,
Yeah.
like the the level that jumps is insane, like it's ridiculous. Like no one who's at that previous level can even hope to beat you at that point. Like you've literally just eclipsed yourself to such an insane degree, and it's like so incredibly unrealistic. It's almost like it's like when Naruto just suddenly like randomly, now I can use all of the Biju. Like I've just made friends with the Nine Tails, and now I can just use all of his power. And he goes from being like sage mode, like I can beat pain, to just like I'm now like a god, and I'm gonna send 1,000 shadow clones to every battlefront and solo win this entire war. Like it was so insane the power jump that happened. And yeah, I don't know.
It
It's kind of
definitely is
annoying when
crazy.
that happens. It's like because I love watching someone. I love training arcs, even though they're kind of like dumb. There's no real story to it. I love training arcs and watching the character that I'm invested in like get stronger over time. But I hate when they just kind of click their fingers and then just suddenly they're like a god out of nowhere. It doesn't feel like they've earned it.
I mean, it definitely is crazy.
Like I feel like they should have handled Asta being able to turn to that black form a lot better than when he did, because he's fighting the guy that absorbs magic. Next minute, he's like flying through the air, and I'm like genuinely questioning if he could beat like people like P2 and stuff like that. Like I'm just like, is this guy just like straight up like one of the strongest characters in anime now, just out of fucking nowhere? Because he's literally flying around at like Mach speed, cutting like anything. Literally has a sword that can cut anything in half. Like the seemingly nothing has like stopped has he's not been able to he's never failed to cut something.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Anyway, that was a very big aside.
All
Um,
good.
I'm getting real hungry. That's probably why I'm losing my
Nah.
friggin' train
All
of
good.
thought. So,
I reckon time to wrap it up.
yep.
Catch you through the
All right,
week.
we'll definitely catch up. Um,
Any closing
yeah.
thoughts?
Anything else with the chapter? I mean, generally it was a good chapter. Love the
Do you have
introduction of Jinbei.
any? Do you have any thoughts for next week?
Oof. I think it's the same thing that we were talking about last time, where we were talking about how not really sure what kind of like assault they're gonna make. Um, okay, well, seemingly since one of the ships has managed to peel off and got back and started opening cannon fire, we can assume they've had enough time to contact. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's seen as though they had remote. communications. So I think we can assume that Onigashima is going to know that they're coming, which is a big thing, which is pretty good. Because before that, they were like drunk, assumedly drunk, having a banquet, which I feel like actually talking about it, it could potentially be another Kaido is drunk for the first half of
Arc.
the Onigashima, yeah, mini arc, and so like he's not very serious, and so it doesn't have to be immediately Luffy, Law, and Kid immediately start fighting the Yonko. There could be time where they're fighting like some fodder people, kind of showing off their power skills and stuff like that. Um,
It could be a matter of Big Mom and
yeah, who
Kaido are
knows?
both there, and like they're drunk, so they've lost interest in Luffy, and they're just like subordinates. Go defeat them. You should be more than enough to beat them. What are you, fodder?
Hmm. Well, so it could genuinely just be that like it could be the thing is the Yonko are such a higher tier than anyone else on the island that like it could possibly be that they beat everyone else, almost everyone else other than the two Yonko. But then the only people that are strong enough to even try to fight the Yonko are Luffy, Law, and Kid. And so it's not like you have everyone on two. It's like literally like Zoro and Sanji are just kind of sitting back watching because they're like, if I try to step in, I'll just get one shot.
We
You know what I mean? Like,
also we also don't know how big Onigashima is as an island.
yeah, that is true.
Um, they Big Mom, Kaido, and Orochi could be in the center of the island, which is away from like a mass of the conflict. If like the commanders realize they're coming and get contacted, they could go and try and deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it could be that Kid kind of has like a preliminary fight, but the thing is, like, Luffy and Law could have preliminary fights as well. Maybe like the numbers are half decent. Like,
Well,
I don't see Luffy getting pushed too much, um, but like I don't know, like
I feel like
I
Luffy
could see
gets
them
pushed
fighting
as
more.
much as Kid does leading up to this fight. I feel like if any of them was going to get
Yeah,
pushed more, it would have been Law, considering Law has been showcased to be less than Doflamingo, who's seemingly less than Cracker, who Kid at least seemingly injured one of the commanders, whether Cracker
yeah, definitely.
or Snack. You know what I mean?
He obviously has had time to get stronger, but there hasn't been any direct mention of a way that he would specifically get
I mean, his
stronger.
powers are just broken,
Like,
so they bypass a lot of people's defense, especially if they don't know about it. But if anyone needs to showcase that they're up to scratch going into this fight, it's probably Law.
I'd say it's a lot. The thing is, like, yeah, like he's had time to get a power increase since Dofi, but like, I mean, you've seen directly like Sanji has been given the raid suit. Luffy has had direct fights against strong opponents to get stronger from. Zoro has been given that sword that he's been training with for a week, specifically training to get stronger. You haven't really seen
I
anyone like
mean, Law's always
give
had
Law an idea.
Law's always had the base plan of whatever it was that had a 30% chance to beat Kaido.
Exactly. And you'd assume he had that before. Like I'd assume he's not going to calculate into his plan, like, oh, I'm going to get 20% stronger and then be able to beat him.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'd assume he already was able to. Yeah.
I reckon next week what'll happen is we get a brief little talk with Jinbei. He like offhandedly mentions how they escaped from Big Mum, maybe alluding to something else. Oh, mind blown. 3 days ago. Oh no, it was the day before that the warlords. It was either 3 days ago or it's the same day that the battle's going on right now. The warlords are being attacked, right?
Right. Okay. I'm not sure.
It's either. I think we had the countdown of the 3 days leading up to the raid had what's going on around the world. Um, Although some of it was potentially in flashback because we had X Drake talking to Kobe about it.
Yeah. Right.
We very well could get news right now in the next chapter of how Jinbei escaped, but then Jinbei cuts it off and goes, I know we've got to deal with these two Yonko right now, but there's something you need to know going on outside in the world. And he drops the news about Sabo.
Yeah. That could be true.
Um, this could be a little bit of exposition to get us hyped for after Wano while we're still in Wano, as editors and whatnot love to do. Um,
Here's the thing as well is it could possibly. I mean, they're still heavily outnumbered, so I could still see the Grand Fleet coming in, and then story-wise, even though obviously the Grand Fleet's very, very powerful, as being that there's so many and they're pretty strong characters. I mean, you could just say like the numbers are there. All the numbers are very strong. All the numbers are equal to the commanders of the Grand Fleet. You
Yep.
know what I mean? Like you could very easily like add the Grand Fleet into the fight and then dismiss them with counter forces.
Yep.
So it could be like Jinbe's got the Grand Fleet together, but it's not just for this battle. It's like, okay, we need to clean this up quick and we need to go save Sabo. It could be something like
Potentially,
that.
or there's so many other possibilities in that. For all we know, as much as we don't want to admit it, maybe the bad thing is that the warlords have all been wiped out except for maybe Weevil. Um,
Oh.
I know that might sound absolutely blasphemous. They're like, oh, you're not taking out Mihawk, but like, I mean, hell, what if they sent Green Bull? We don't know what Green Bull's powers are. It might be a bad matchup for Mihawk.
Oh.
I mean, it is. It's weird. Like I feel like Weevil, Mihawk, and Boa are the three warlords that you'd need to send an admiral for individually to beat. But um, you know, people have speculated that Fuji's going after Boa. That would be the perfect matchup, considering he can't see, so he wouldn't get fodderized by her ability. We
Definitely.
didn't see anyone with Weevil, so and because because Weevil is more needed in the story for a resolution than the likes of Mihawk at the moment.
Yeah, I don't see them introducing him and then just taking him out. That's dumb. Unless
Um,
they wanted to, yeah, no, that's dumb. Because
there's
the
a,
thing is, like, even if they wanted to introduce him as just like a reason that a lot of the Whitebeard pirates have gotten killed, they could have just said that a lot of them got killed during the Grudge War, and then that like makes Blackbeard seem more badass. They don't need to create an entire character just to
I mean,
have them killed by someone.
we obviously think that the world government's going to be the final villain of the series, realistically at this point in time.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Um, hell, they could do a Swifty on us and have Green Bull be a swordsman, him take out Hawkeye, and then you have Shiryu try to turn invisible and take out Green Bull, and Green Bull's just like, "What do you think you're doing?" and kills Shiryu. And then we're like, "Oh, okay, so Green Bull's the undisputed best swordsman in the world, is he?"
Yeah, potentially.
I
And
mean,
then
I would probably hate it because I love Mihawk so much, but there's so many things to go on.
the only thing that wouldn't tilt me is if Mihawk didn't have an on-screen fight that he got tested, because Mihawk is a kind of person where his kind of his demeanor is very calm and casual, and I want to see that get pushed. Like I want to see him stress, and if he just gets off-screen beaten, it'll annoy the hell out of
Well,
him.
I'd like to say if he gets stressed, the second he's stressed, you can't use observation haki, in which case he's done.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting. Now that Jinbei's here, it does open up the possibility of finding out that information and finding out what's going on. For all we know, the world government has Wano surrounded and is just waiting for an outcome.
Mhm.
There's a, it's weird because it's hard to keep track of everything that's going on.
It's really difficult because there's so much happening and there's so many unanswered questions. Like anyone could do anything. Like they said they're going out for a purge. Don't know what that means. The what's it called? The Revolutionary Army is making moves. Don't know what they're doing. Don't know what happened at the
Reverie.
Reverie. Don't know what happened with like the Fishmen stuff that's going on. We don't know what's happening with like Vivi and her family. We don't know like there's so
Bonnie.
much stuff.
We don't know what's going on with Bonnie. Last time we saw
Don't
her,
know what's happening with Bonnie and Kuma.
she was about to. We know that the revolutionaries attacked and tried to free Kuma, but we don't know what Bonnie played a role in that scenario.
Oh,
There's a lot Oda's playing 4D chess at the moment. He's got multiple boards set up. He's playing chess. He's playing checkers. He's playing poker, and everyone's sitting here just playing Texas Hold'em, just waiting.
I feel like he's realized that there are so many people that are so hardcore into the show, and they're like always trying to predict what happens. And in an attempt to make it unpredictable, he's just kind of decided on a final outcome and then just gone, I wonder how confusing I can make this shit, like how messy I can make this,
Hey,
so no one can ever predict this final outcome.
look at Wano. Since we got to Wano, oh, there's a traitor in the midst. Ignore the traitor. Oh no, we're gonna blame Law for being the traitor. Oh, ignore the traitor. What? There was a traitor? What? Nani? I mean, realistically, it would have been more entertaining. Or I mean, actually, going back to that, Law seems to have had enough of the scabbards. Even in this chapter, he's just like, get off my ship. You're not welcome on my
Yeah.
ship. At the end of last act, it almost implied that Law was about to betray the Alliance. For all we know, he's teamed up with X Drake on the side of keeping a balance in terms of the world.
And here's the thing, though, is that his whole goal entirely was to take out Doflamingo, and he only really wanted Kaido there
To take out
as kind
Dofi.
of yeah, to take out Dofi so that he could get Luffy or someone to help him, right, with that alliance. It wasn't necessarily like he didn't necessarily want to take down Kaido himself. He just wanted to get Kaido to take down Dofi. And then he was like, well, if you want to take down Kaido, let's do that then. And so it was pretty interesting, because his job is already complete, essentially. Like his kind of life goal has already completed, and so I wouldn't put it past him to either die or be a betrayer and then get beaten or anything like that. Because honestly, like, so far he served his purpose in the show, and he can pretty much just kind of take a back seat for the rest of the show. He doesn't have to continue being a main character. Like, if he's not going to do any kind of betrayal or anything like that, he can stay as like one of the three main fighters for the rest of this arc. But I feel like regardless what happens after this arc, he's just kind of he's just going to sort of like take a back seat. I
Yeah.
don't think he's going to be a very significant character despite his popularity. I just don't think he has much of a purpose in terms of like being written as a character. And I think honestly, it'll be a bad thing if Oda just goes, oh, but he's popular, so we'll keep him in, because it's just not good writing. Like, I think his story is done. Him as a character is complete, and then he's moved on after this arc.
I mean,
So yeah, I guess like I wouldn't put it past anything from happening. He could be a betrayer. He could be killed during a fight, or he could just survive till the end and then just go, "I'll just be one of your commanders, whatever," and then he'd just be kind of like one of the many Grand Fleet commanders.
there is
He
a
doesn't have to be significant.
there is a lot of possibilities. I mean, like, honestly, time will tell what's going on. It's hard to predict. One Piece is that weird show where you can predict 70% of what's going to happen in the next chapter, and then the other 30% is like, what? What? This doesn't make sense. How could you have predicted this? This is so random. Before we go, let me just put one image in your mind, right? We get to Onigashima. We have the 20,000 pirates and the 10,000 samurai. Our whole group of allies is just desperately dying to take revenge. Could you imagine? You know how Wano's had an abundance of sword lore, but we've also had a sort of lacking in named swords.
Yeah, right.
Could you imagine if Kid gets a temporary power up this arc where he's just got multiple grade swords and he's just fighting non-stop with just multiple decent tier swords? Instead of normal giant arms, he's just got a giant spiked sword mech.
I'd imagine him fighting like Darth Freya from Star Wars, like
Just
just
multiple
mind
blades flying
controlling.
around.
Yeah, like phantasmal blades, just cutting everybody apart.
It'd be interesting. I mean, do you know what else would be really interesting?
Mm.
Could you imagine? So we haven't seen a projectile sword slash from Killer, right?
Yeah.
We know that in CP9 they have the projectile leg kicks, the Sorus.
Yeah.
Oh, not Sorus.
Yeah.
Sorus are flying takeover. They got the projectile leg kicks. One of them, the ones that Jabra did, turned into a wolf and bounced. It would be super interesting to see a full-powered killer send out a projectile sword slash that actually weaves in the air.
As in, like the same way these blades do.
Yes. So say if someone
Yeah,
goes to, could you imagine? Say it's spinning, you go to block the projectile sword slash, and it actually spins around the sword and hits you in the back.
I mean, like I could imagine it, for example, like it spins in a certain direction. Say it goes down for your leg, and then you block it down at your leg, so
And
your
then
hands
shoots
are
up.
low, and then yeah, because it's spinning that way, it just kind of spins off your sword and comes up and cuts your arm.
I don't
Pretty
know.
interesting.
I'm getting keen now. Onigashima 2020, dying for the wins, dying for the fights.
There's a lot of deaths. Makes it
It's
interesting.
speaking from the words of the immortal man himself. Wano is gonna make Marineford look like filler. All right, catches. Have a good one. Bye bye.